Good evening. This is the September 20th, 2018 meeting of the Monroe Planning and Zoning Commission. We're meeting in Town Council Chambers. It's now 7:06 p.m. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commission, please introduce yourself, starting on my right.
Brian Condon, alternate.
Kenneth Wilk, alternate.
Jonathan Formicella, alternate.
Bruno Maini, commissioner.
Leanne Ambrosi, Commissioner.
William Porter, Chairman.
Paul Lisi, Secretary.
Will Agresta, Planning and Zoning Administrator.
Scott Schatz, I am Land Use Group Director and Town Engineer.
And Michael Riley is excused. He's tied up at work this evening. All right, item number 3, organizational and administrative. Will we have some date changes?
Yes, so the upcoming meetings for October and November, the second meetings both times. That would be the scheduled meetings are October 18th and November 15th. October 18th would be the 25th, and November 15th would be the 14th, the day before, a Wednesday.
So the second October meeting is pushed back 1 week, pushed forward 1 week, and November, we're going to be holding the meeting on Wednesday instead of Thursday,
What's the date?
14th.
The 14th?
So it's October 25th in lieu of the 18th, and November 14th in place of November 15th. So if you would all please note that. And Will, maybe you can send out an email reminder tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay. General public participation. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on an issue that's not related to a hearing? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. General appointments, we have none. Public hearings. We have one. For the sake of anyone who might not have been here for the first night of this hearing, I will read the instructions for a public hearing. There are 2 sets of microphones for both public address and recording of the proceedings. Due to the need for recording, it is important to stand at the microphone at all times and speak into it loudly and clearly in order that everyone in the room can hear and to capture what is being said. Individuals speaking from the seats will not be heard and will not be recognized to speak. Order of the hearing of an application. Points of order and responses will be entertained. Exhibits will be read for the record. Applicant and/or representatives will present the application and will answer commission questions. The floor will be open to those in favor. The floor will be open to those opposed. The floor will be open to general comments or questions. The floor will be open to the applicant, who may take the opportunity for closing remarks or rebuttal, after which discussion will close. The applicant or his representatives are the final speakers. No comment shall be accepted from anyone unless recognized by the chair. All questions and comments shall be addressed to the chair, who will determine if an answer shall be provided and by whom. There shall be absolutely no discussion between speakers and audience. The commission has no intention to limit the right of any person to speak, but asks that speakers try not to be repetitive. Please try to present new information. If something has been said before, the commission would invite you to indicate your agreement with previous speakers. At no time shall there be displays of emotion, such as applause, cheering, shouting, or similar noise. This is critical as this hearing is being recorded. If this happens, you will be cautioned. A vote or demonstration by a show of hands, standing by the audience, or similar action will not be recognized. All parties are requested not to talk between themselves while the hearing is in progress. If you feel the need to talk, please step out into the lobby. All speakers, when recognized, must advance to the microphone to speak. Please state your name and address for the record. The chairman reserves the right to cut off discussion if it is not relevant to the application or is presented in an inappropriate manner. This is a legal proceeding, much the same as what would occur in a courtroom setting. We request that all parties observe the proper decorum that would be observed in that setting. Please turn off all cell phones or similar devices. If you have a need to use these devices, please leave the room and use them outside. Okay, so first up, item number 6, SCP 2018-03, file number 1598A, 205 Monroe Turnpike, limited office retail zone, special exception permit. This is a reconvened hearing from September 6th, 2018. Will, what do we have for new exhibits?
Exhibit 32, waiver request. Exhibit 33, response to comments by the applicant. Exhibit 34, building material packets from the applicant's architect. Exhibit 35, internal landscape figure. Exhibit 36, updated plan set from the architectural drawings. And Exhibit 37, engineering updated drawings. Exhibit 38, updated ART town engineer comments. Exhibit 39, updated ART planner comments. Exhibit 40, updated ART comments by the health department. And Exhibit 41, additional updated comments from the health department. That is it.
And for the applicant.
Chairman, members of the commission, Raymond Rizzio, happy to be before you tonight. Office at One Post Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. We met immediately after our board was nice enough to grant us an extension to this meeting tonight and then also put us on this agenda. We immediately met with staff and proceeded to make proceeded to address the comments from engineering and planning. I have Kevin Soley here tonight that'll take you through those changes. Those plans have been submitted. We believe we're in a position tonight where we've addressed what I think were all the open issues, and to a point where we hope we can get to a point where we can close the hearing tonight and hopefully move forward with this development, which we're very proud of. So Kevin, if you could step forward and just take the commission through the plans, and then we'll be available for comments.
Thanks, Ray. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located here in Monroe at 501 Main Street. So as Ray indicated, we're here for a continuation of the public hearing. Just to orient everybody, I like to do this in aerial of the town of Monroe. Our site's located just north of the town line on Route 25, or excuse me, Route 111. Let's see it here. The site's being developed in 2 parcels. Lot 1, the Noble Gas station convenience facility located here, and Lot 2, proposed restaurant, family restaurant, 17,500 square foot mixed use or mixed retail building, and then a medical office facility. So at the last hearing, we had gotten some comments from staff. We provided a formal response to those comments. We met with staff. We made, and we got some revised comments from them. What I'm going to do is run through some of those big picture changes, and then also kind of talk through, I want to address all of the latest round of staff comments that we had, talk through those specific issues, and actually our presentation has actually been revised to incorporate some revisions to some of those comments I want to discuss and present to the commission this evening, and we think that we can, provided what we have is acceptable, we think we'd be able to accept some of these as conditions of approval. Made some minor modifications to the site plan based on staff comments, some discussions here, and also some last minute health department comments that we received. One of those issues regarding the septic layout for the restaurant. The restaurant is proposed, the septic system for the restaurant is proposed in the northeast corner of the site here based on suitable acceptable soils. We got some last minute comments regarding some potential requirements from OSS to make sure that we have no issue moving forward with the Department of Public Health. We made some minor revisions to that. We've actually sent that back to Rich Jackson. I spoke with Rich Jackson this afternoon. I think he even provided an updated comment letter to you today. And we're comfortable with what we have. What the change was is we essentially had to lose 8 parking spaces in this location here. Overall, Lot 2 still required to provide 234 spaces, and we have 243 spaces provided. There were some comments regarding our revised landscape plan and the configuration of our stone walls. We'll talk about that in a little more detail, but we're happy to make some modifications to that, provide stone walls straight across the property, coming in along the driveways. We think that'll be a very good design aesthetic for that. And that's been incorporated from a utility standpoint. Again, we made this revision to the septic area towards the rear of the restaurant Everything else, I think we actually addressed the majority of Scott's comments, and the ones that are left are ones that we can certainly talk through and comply with. So from a septic standpoint, and one of Will's comments, we are proposing our septic system within the required landscape buffer, which is permitted under the regulations, as provided that we demonstrate that we can still provide acceptable screening. What we've done is the requirement is a 50-foot landscape screen with 2 rows of trees. What we've actually provided is over 100 feet of landscape buffer from this specific property here. It is bifurcated with the leaching fields. However, we do and we have proposed and we will, we can provide additional details regarding how this would establish a substantive screen and a kind of plant in between those septic rows. And again, we do have some limitations from a septic standpoint. We've done extensive investigation with the health department. This is the only suitable area we can accommodate the septic flows, so we've designed this accordingly. And we do feel that what we've proposed does provide a robust buffer and does meet the intent of the regulations.
You mentioned earlier that we got some kind of an update today from Rich.
Yeah.
The only update we have said that more soil testing is required. That's dated today.
So, yes, so we did additional testing through that area. And actually, if you, he had issued comments on the 14th, or actually it may have been the 18th, 2 days ago.
On the 18th we did.
Right, and one of his major concerns was regarding the incorporating MLSS calculations for this specific area. We then revisited the design here. We provided a revised drawing to Rich for his consideration, and you can see the plans that the notes that he provided today eliminated that asterisk that shows that's something that needs to be addressed prior to the hearing. I talked with Rich this afternoon. You know, he's a little, since the overall site does exceed the 2,000 gallons per day that is regulated only by him, this will require additional permit from the Department of Public Health. Based on my discussions with Rich, our investigations that have been completed to date, I have no concern regarding providing adequate septic disposal systems for this restaurant in this location. We will likely have to do some additional test holes to satisfy Matt Pollock in the Department of Public Health, but we do not think that poses any real risk from a design or a layout standpoint. And obviously, we understand and acknowledge that if as part of that permit process there is some substantive change that affects our ability to develop the site as we're proposing, we obviously understand we'd have to come back before this commission to make any modifications to reflect that. But based on everything we've done to date, our conversations with Rich again today, I'm confident that what we've proposed is sufficient and can meet the requirements.
Did you get a copy of the memo that he sent to us?
Yes, yeah.
Because it says the additional soil testing and state review could potentially change the layout of the septic system, parking, and even reduce the proposed flow for the restaurant.
Yes, and Rich and I spoke after he issued this memo and we talked about it.
And
Yes.
one thing, Chairman, should it require an alteration in the site plan, obviously we'd have to come back to you for any modification of the site plan. So that's where we're willing to live with that as it's in effect.
I just wanted that clear on.
Yeah, no, and of course, and that's something that, you know, we were very quick to respond to this to make sure that there wasn't a substantive issue that was going to affect us. We've incorporated those design changes into our own site planning. We didn't submit revised information for you, but we are presenting that to you as part of our hearing this evening, presentation this evening. And again, I did talk to Rich this afternoon around 4:30 after those comments were issued. And I'm comfortable with our discussion and our design as we've provided it. From a landscape standpoint, we do have up on the screen some revisions to the landscape plan. We provided some additional landscaping along the front of the property. We've incorporated straight stone walls along the front of the property. We've made some changes, obviously, to the proposed landscaping in the rear of the site. Again, we have a 50-foot required buffer. We actually have well over 100 feet in this area, and we have 2 bands of landscaping which will provide that robust screen and that thick vegetation. We have some areas where we actually have, where obviously we have leaching fields where we can't plant on top of. We've been able to maximize that overall buffer, and we feel it meets and exceeds the intent of the regulation. We incorporated some additional landscaping along the front drive aisle. We talked about this at the last hearing. And then along the front as well, again, we have the stone walls coming straight across. We have some additional landscape enhancements on both sides. We feel what we've provided and designed is a robust planting plan, which will truly serve as a beautiful project as you come into Monroe, because obviously we recognize this is the gateway to the town, and we've designed the plan accordingly. We're proud of what we've provided. We provide additional figures for the internal landscaping. We far exceed what's required. We're required to provide 1,300 square feet. We have 22, 11,600 square feet for Lot 2, and we have 12,900. So we exceed the minimum 10% interior landscaping requirement. And Will, this actually reflects your comment from your latest letter about incorporating these additional areas, which further demonstrates our compliance.
Even though your figure doesn't show that?
Excuse me?
Even though your figure doesn't show that?
This is a revised figure.
No, but it's still showing whited out.
You want to include all of this area? We're happy. Either way, we're,
Like, look at the arch, the arches and the arch backs, yeah, those areas.
well, it's sidewalk.
No, the driveway, right below your arrow,
Here,
yeah, there.
okay. I think it's just a hatch issue. Obviously, we still comply, and I think we're comfortable.
Well, if you didn't include those white areas, that would increase your impervious area, which would change your ratio.
Well,
Have you include all the paved areas?
we did. We're confident we meet the intent of the 10%.
Not the intent, we're confident.
No, we're confident we meet the
We meet the
requirement.
10%.
Excuse me, yes,
Yeah.
we meet
Well,
the
I'm
10%
asking,
requirement.
It's
are those-
math,
are
it's
those
not
white areas-
discretion, I understand.
Are the white areas in your internal parking area and impervious area?
Yes,
And are they included in your calculation?
yes.
Okay.
We did have our off-site roadway plan. I'm not sure if that got into all the packages. We thought we had
It
submitted
wasn't
it,
in my
but
packet.
we do have that information. And I will provide an update from a DOT standpoint. We actually do have our Step 2 OSTA meeting scheduled with the DOT for Monday, October 15th. So this project is moving along swimmingly in accordance with that process. We provided updated architectural elevations to talk about some of the signage. There were some comments about the overall square footage of those areas. We provided updated plans depicting those areas and the overall square footages. Additionally, we provided some additional information regarding our proposed pylon sign. Now, there were some additional comments issued from Will today regarding the calculation for that sign area. And the proposed sign area, in accordance with the definition, is the 205 Monroe Turnpike, the address, and then the individual sign panels. And the regulations are clear, and they say that in measuring the sign area, the area is determined by multiplying the outside dimensions of the sign, not including the vertical, horizontal, or diagonal supports which affix the sign to the ground, unless such supports are evidently designed to be part of the sign as defined herein. These are simply vertical supports holding up those signs. And part of the concern or the comment that came from staff was that these vertical columns should somehow be considered in the overall sign calculation. This sign area, as provided, is less than the 40 square foot we're permitted. You know, this is a vertical support which supports the sign. If for some reason, because we've designed such a nice column from an aesthetic and architectural standpoint, if that's somehow being interpreted as being part of the sign area, we're happy to make it less attractive, so there's no question, but we don't calculation standpoint. This is a comment that's still outstanding from staff, so I want to make sure we have a chance to discuss this with the commission to make sure our interpretation is consistent with your interpretation. With that, I just wanted to run through each of the comments from staff and make sure we had a chance to discuss them and understand how the commission feels about some of those and if they're confident with how we can respond to those comments. Sorry, I had too much paper today. So we talked about the revised health department comments. Again, we're confident that we can comply with those requirements. So we can start with we can start with Will's comments, which were issued on the 18th. So number one, confirmation from the Health Department verifying the adequacy of the proposed septic and water supply systems remains pending. Also, the number of seats permitted in the proposed restaurant has also not been determined or confirmed from either a health or fire building code perspective to determine if 50 or more seats are possible to permit the desired alcohol service consistent with the standards and additional commission approval needed for such per zoning 6.7. I can say that the footprint for the proposed restaurant has been designed to provide for exceeding 50 seats. The septic system has been designed based on potential empirical data for a possible user for that facility that exceeds the 50 seats. I'm not sure the formal process that this commission usually takes in order to authorize a liquor permit associated with a restaurant approval, but I think we've requested that this commission allow that as part of this approval process. And if we have to provide that verification as a condition of approval, we're happy to do that. And again, we discussed the rest of the comments, and we're confident that obviously we do have a permit we have to pursue from the Department of Public Health, and we're comfortable that we're going to be able to comply with all those requirements. Number two, the commission should determine if it has sufficient substantive information or exploration of potential alternatives relative to the requested waivers prior to closing of the public hearing in order for it to make an informed decision in the granting or not of the following requested waivers. So there are a couple that I talked about. One is the 50-foot landscape buffer towards the rear residential zone boundary, because we are proposing septic systems within that boundary. We've talked about how we have an extensive area there that will be planted, and even I think Will's comment talked about recommended mowing in terms of doing that once or twice a year rather than regular lawn mowing. There's no intent for that to be treated as a yard or a lawn or anything like that, so I think we're happy to comply with the request for mowing schedule, but we do feel that what we've provided meets the intent of that.
And if you look at, I think this overhead picture speaks, volumes. When you look at the residence that has there's a tremendous amount of buffering between that and the residence, which fronts out onto Sprinkle Road. You have buffering both in grade and then buffering in mature planting. Well beyond 100 feet, even on the other side of the property, on the residential side of the property.
Thanks, Ray. The next comment, waiver of 6.4.9C. Change in contour within 25 feet of the property lines. The regulations do permit the commission to allow grading within 25 feet of the property line. We've done so to try to we proposed that, and we're requesting a waiver in accordance with the provisions of the regulations.
Do you have a grading plan?
We do.
I'll just point out to the commission the areas that you're asking for a waiver.
Sure. So we have some grading on the southern side of the property in this location here, and along the northern edge of the property in this location here in order to create these flat pads. Obviously the grades through that property are pretty extensive as you go from the road towards the back, so we do have some considerable grading through here on the overall site, but we're also proposing some grading in this location here. All of our grades are within there's only one small area where we have 2-to-1 grades. The majority of them are 3-to-1 or 2.5-to-1, and again, all of those grades can be designed in stable conditions, so there's no concern there. We've incorporated some of those measures into our plans. But we are requesting the ability to do those grading within the property line. And I think that is consistent with how the commission has handled some other applications that have come through, that do grade in close proximity to the property lines.
Yeah, there's also, I know in other applications that I've been involved with, there's been no requirement of getting any kind of grading. We can handle this all within our property lines. There's no requirement for us to get any grading easement from any adjoining properties.
Additionally, we are proposing this grading to minimize any height of any retaining walls that are along the sides, and they are very small.
For the benefit of the commissioners that might not be versed in reading grading plans, could you just explain to them some maybe height differentials in these areas?
I'd be happy to. So along the northern edge of the property. The existing grade along the property goes from elevation 453 down here. You can see these contours which run up. This has a pretty good grade, and it goes up to approximately 463, 468 up in this corner. Oh, where'd my cursor go? Up here. So we do have some grades. Our restaurant pad is at elevation 454 in this top corner. It does come up. Our finished floor of our restaurant pad is about 453. So there is grading down from the property line to get down to this grade, and we do have a very small retaining wall, less than the 6 feet that's allowable within the building setback. To the south, along Noble Gas in this location here. So the grades along this property line, they range from 438, 440 down in this front corner. Towards the back, we tie in approximately 38. It's somewhat flat along here. There's relatively minor grades. Our gas station facility, this finished floor is at 447, so this does come up in grade a little bit. So this is also filled so that this is elevated from the property line with a slope down to a very small, 2-foot boulder wall along this property line. Up in the back in this corner here, our lower elevations is approximately 440, 439. This is up at an elevation 459, so this is up in the air. And we do have a retaining wall which kind of wraps around here, so we're grading back down to the property line. There were some comments as part of the last iteration about the location of this retaining wall. We made some very minor changes to that to ensure that a retaining wall exceeding 6 feet was not proposed in any building setback. And we do have a very small, 3 foot, it goes from 1.5 to 3 feet at its highest point. This little small wall, but then this wall's a little bit taller and it wraps around within the limits of the building setback.
How tall is a little bit taller?
Excuse me?
How tall is a little bit taller?
Which?
You said that the one that,
Oh,
the
this?
U-shaped one is a little bit taller.
Oh, no, that's it goes from, let's see, I have the bottom of the walls called out. It's at its highest point down in this corner, and it's about a 15-foot wall at its highest point in this corner.
Okay, thank you.
And the nice part about where that grading has to happen is where the rear end of an industrial site contractor's property where you have storage bins and everything else. So it's
You can see that well from the aerial.
Yeah, so it's not. I don't think we're still greatly improving the character of that portion of the property.
Continuing on with the rest of Will's comments, and we can certainly dive into these more. Waiver of 6.4.9D, artificial slope greater than 4:1 within 50 feet of side and rear property lines. Again, we are proposing slopes greater than 4:1, but we do not exceed 2:1. And then waiver of 6.4.9E, artificial slope greater than 4:1 within 50 feet of front street line. We do have a small area where we're doing a 3:1 slope along the front street line through here. And 3:1 is a relatively gradual slope. I'm trying to think somewhere in town that has a similar slope. I'd guess actually the CVS, right in front of the CVS where that wall is, that's probably pretty close to a 3:1 slope, to give you guys some context. Will's comment number 3, the excluded internal circulation driveway areas on figure 8 should not be excluded as they're integral to and component of the paved parking lots. Again, we meet the requirement, and we can, we've discussed that, I
Well,
believe.
yeah, you answered previously that
Yep.
all of the paved areas are included in your calculation.
Yes. The proposed reconstructed stone wall along the front property line has been revised with the serpentine alignment, which is atypical and out of character with traditional farmer stone walls found within Monroe and throughout New England. The site stone wall should be revised to extend in a straight line alignment across the entire street frontage from property line to property line with openings for site driveways only. Again, we had, in the plans we submitted to the commission, we tried to take a little bit of a more design, we took some liberties with our design to try to create a little bit more of a nice aesthetic with some serpentine walls, some landscaping pockets in front, et cetera. We're happy to provide just straight stone walls. We presented that tonight, this evening, and we still have some landscaping to further accentuate those walls.
How high are you proposing to make that wall?
Standard farm wall, I believe our detail calls it out as 3 feet in height. It's consistent with the town of Monroe standard detail for,
Do you have a detail?
yeah, we do. We should.
Okay.
Yeah,
3.6 minimum.
3 foot 6 inches minimum, 1 foot 6 inches width, actually 3.12. Number 5, the zoning compliance table on sheet 0.10. These are all minor Scrivener things we can certainly incorporate, it's no issue. Number 6, the front landscape buffer along the street frontage remains minimal in comparison to other recently approved projects. As previously commented, the front landscape buffer area should be more fully covered with shrubs and ground cover other than lawn. Also, the landscaping around the sign should flow more naturally within the front landscape buffer area, consistent with the standards set forth in 6.2, 7.23, and 7.31E. Proposed planting should be expanded to minimize the amount of open lawn. It goes on. I'll keep reading. The landscape buffer envisioned by the applicable standards in zoning 6.24C, low flowering perennial plants such as daylilies, black-eyed Susan, Shasta daisy, coneflower, liatris, primrose, sedum lavender, or similar. And then it includes the reference to 6.4.2C. I want to point out in 6.4.2C2, it says landscape buffers may consist of a combination. You know, what we've provided, again, we feel is a robust planting plan that will prove to be a gem in the town of Monroe. And while we may not have complete ground cover in that entire yard area, one of the things we've done is we've maximized the landscaping inside the parking area as well. We have minimal lawn area. We have ground cover throughout the property. We have an extensive planting plan, which we think meets and exceeds the overall intent of the regulations. So what we're presenting here this evening, we would respectfully request the commission consider for approval.
We think we've achieved that balance between, even though people call it a buffer, really that accented landscaping that enhances the property to something that becomes a literal buffer, which is what you don't want in a retail project, meaning that you can't, you have so much that you don't even see. The people who are users and the people who are going to occupy these buildings want to be seen from the street. So the question becomes, we believe we have the appropriate, certainly have by volume enough, and we think the character of what we presented provides the accent, enough of an accent consistent with your regulations. That is something that will really enhance this entire site and the entrance to Monroe. Lawn is in some areas, lawn is clean, it's good looking, it's maintained. It's certainly, and we don't believe we have too much of it. We think it's a good green space. It creates, we've designed a little village-like atmosphere which has enough open space, enough open area, and not just a big box or a U or a we think we have the appropriate balance, that each of them have their own landscape character within each segment, from where the gasoline convenience store is to where the restaurant is to where the medical center is, and all are very appropriate. Obviously, the landscaping you have that abuts the residences, you want thick and blocking the rear of the buildings, but where you spend the money and design for front of these buildings, you want to make them, you would like to see them to be visible. And we think we've accomplished that.
Number 7, gas station and convenience retail store. The two references to restaurant and drive-through service aisle and queuing compliance tables on sheet 2-1 are misplaced. That's fine. They should read convenience retail store instead. That's a simple fix. 7B, The revised detail for the proposed drive-through menu board included on sheet CP12 is still slightly oversized. The menu board is proposed with a dimension of 5 feet by 6.5 for an area of 32.5 square feet, with 32 square feet permitted. We can make that revision. We've actually, the plans we presented tonight actually incorporate that change. The revised freestanding sign detail on sheet CP13 should be revised as follows. The freestanding sign is still slightly oversized. The sign is proposed with a sign area dimension of 8 feet 8 inches by 5 feet for 43 square feet. Again, we've made the change to reflect 40 square feet, which is permitted. The sign is proposed as an internally lighted sign, which proposes a white background, which is not permitted per zoning 6315C, and we've made that change as well. The plans prepared for that reflect those changes. 7D, the plan indicates 5 bollards in front of the convenience store for the gas station, 2 of which are assumed to be for the signpost for the handicap accessible signs. A decorative cap detail has been added to sheet 3.02 for these bollards. Similar to that to use at Cumberland Farms, which is good. As such, the label for these bollards on sheet 2.11 should be expanded to reference the decorative bollard detail. Also, the specified blue color for the decorative bollard noted in the detail on sheet 3.02 should be changed to black or white, as only the handicap accessible signposts should be colored blue so not to confuse drivers as to which spaces are the handicap accessible spaces. Also, if desired, the handicap bollard blue cap sleeve can be plain, does not need to be decorative. I think this is okay. The color of the bollard sleeves, having consistency with blue is fine. I don't think that's going to really create an issue in whether or not you're parking in a handicap space, because that's what the handicap striping is for and what the sign is for. But we're happy to make that revision. Number 8, mixed commercial uses. The revised freestanding sign detail on sheet 8301 still shows a larger sign and taller sign than permitted. The sign is labeled pylon, but shows a ground sign. Ground signs permit a maximum height of 8 feet, not 17. We talked a little bit about this already. And this is the rest of these comments. The height should be reduced to comply with the standards for ground monument sign by lowering the stone base, eliminating the peak structure above the cap with lighting strip as it is unnecessary mass bulk. Also, the width 2 feet and bulk of the sidewalls flanking the signboards are okay on a monument sign, meaning the maximum height of only 8 feet, but are oversized if a taller pylon sign is sought instead. On a pylon sign, the sidewall should be considered part of the sign area sized. Again, we kind of talked through this part of the presentation. You know, this, in our interpretation, this complies with the regulations and sign area measurement. If the commission feels strongly that those side columns should be included in area, again, we think those are just vertical supports for the signs themselves, and the area shown in red is under the 40 square feet that's permitted. This, a lot of these changes here are actually ones that we've made since we got the revised comments from Will. So I think the sign that we initially submitted had a much more robust base, which is why Will considered it the overall monument sign. For this, we've eliminated the cultured stone veneer along the entire base to make it more clearly meet the intent of a pylon sign. As previously commented, the restaurant transformer should be relocated away from the small parking area landscaped island to permit the island to be planted with a tree in addition to ground shrubs. The transformer also needs to be removed out of the setback area which crosses through the island. So we've got, see the right plan to show it. There's a small transformer here. We've actually talked about this a couple times at the hearing through some various comments from various commissioners and staff. We had pulled this back and made this island larger so we could get adequate room for doors to open and to provide bollard protection, et cetera. By shifting it back, the building setback line kind of runs right through the center of it. We're happy to bring that forward so it does not extend into the building setback. There's adequate room in that island to accommodate that. Buildings need to provide utilities. We have limited area to provide those utilities. We think that's the optimal location for that transformer, and we're requesting that the commission allow us to locate the transformer there and not add an additional tree to that island. The 8C, the location of the bank ATM within the drive-through should be labeled. We can add that to the plan, but that is something that was shown here. Exterior lighting, to avoid confusion, delete the P1 pole light detail on sheet 2.71, which is no longer proposed. That's fine, we can do that. Contrary to the response to comments, note 3 on sheet 271 still has not been deleted. We can delete that. Gas station canopy elevation still has not been revised to clearly show the detail the concealment of the underside lights per zoning 823F11. We can accept that as a condition. The easternmost 2 light poles for the restaurant shed light off the property in excess of permitted maximum light lumens. The light output of these fixtures should be revised accordingly. We can comply with that as a condition of approval. And last, draft legal instruments should be provided as a condition of approval, and those are acceptable conditions. We planned on doing that after the approval was in hand. And then to Scott's comments. Number 1, informative. We have the wetlands approval from August 24th. Administrative was dealt with. General or technical, the survey should be certified. We can provide that as part of the final review approval drawings. B1, truck turning movements. I think we've demonstrated that trucks inadequately get in and out of the property. Scott has identified that, and we concur, that larger trucks, WB50 or bigger, will have to encroach into opposing lanes within the internal site. This is somewhat standard on shopping centers. If we were to design shopping centers to ensure that there's absolutely no crossover from truck paths, we'd have huge swaths of pavement, which I think is contrary to the intent of trying to expand landscaped islands and minimize pavement. And I think that's a standard condition that is consistent with most developments. Grading 2, detailed grading for the ramps throughout the site should be provided. This is in addition to the ramps at the handicap spaces. We can certainly provide additional details for that. We do have a standard detail, but we can spot that up as part of our review of approval. Number 5, he's okay to defer to DOT standard. We're going to be subject to, this is for the driveway and the lip and the driveway apron. As it is a state road, we're going to have to provide whatever state standard detail they require for that driveway apron and that lip. And I think Scott's okay with that. Traffic and safety, unless the direction around the restaurant is one way, the layout should be revised to avoid the blocking of the access aisle off the south corner of the building by a vehicle or vehicles waiting to exit onto the main central access drive. This will amount to an internal site inconvenience. We've talked about this before. I think the concern is if a car is here having to turn into the driveway, if they're stopped for some reason, it would block traffic here. We do not see that as a major issue from an operations standpoint. It's consistent with a lot of other standard shopping center designs, and we are willing to accept that as a potential inconvenience. However, we don't expect it to be a regular occurrence. Number 4, include the minimum 3-foot dimension or notation for the section of frontage walk south of the main driveway. This is the 3-foot green belt. We do have it on our drawings. You can kind of see it through here. We can add that dimension. No issues there. Number 7, the reference sheet 411 was not provided. Again, I apologize for that, Scott. We do obviously have it. I think I even had it up on the presentation, and that was submitted as part of our DOT application, which again, we have our meeting in early October. And we can provide that as a condition of approval. Number 8, the main signalized driveway should be relocated to align with the main driveway across the street. I think we've talked about that at length. We're very confident that our proposed driveway location will not cause an adverse impact to any of the opposing driveways across the street. We've demonstrated that with analysis that those driveways will be improved from an operations standpoint by the installation of this signal, and we're having those discussions with the DOT as well. E, drainage and utilities. C, IWC comments for hydrology. However, noting the detention systems for UGS 1A, UGS 3.
Just
Yeah.
go back to one thing with regard to that traffic.
Sure.
Mike. One thing that is important to note, and that's, so we just don't misconstrue anything. We believe we've done what we need to. We believe we're going to get the approval from the state, but the change of that, as recommended, if we're accepted with staff and recommended, would literally stop this project. So
Right.
we would not be able to develop this project the way it is, and we would not, and the plan before you, in effect, would be basically a denial, because we can't make the project work, this project work, with moving the light to a different location. We know we're the, not the ultimate authority, we need both of your authorities, but we believe we've demonstrated what we needed to you that the light is in the appropriate location, and we'll have confirmation of that hopefully with the state approval, which we hope to achieve very soon.
Yes. Thanks, Ray. You know, a lot of the last comments that Scott has regarding drainage and utilities, sedimentation and erosion control, and details, they may even put me to sleep. They're so technical. We're happy to comply with all of those as conditions of approval. As much as I enjoy talking about stormwater and things like that, those are acceptable to us. And we can work with Scott to comply with those. And then last, an approval should be contingent on the following: verification of a DOT OSTA permit and DOT highway encroachment permit for the traffic signal and roadway improvements, including the proposed drainage conditions, systems contributing to Monroe Turnpike prior to construction. We're in that process now, and that's an acceptable condition. Providing verification of a deep general stormwater and dewatering wastewaters from construction activities permit prior to the start of construction. That's also a standard condition that's acceptable. For the commission's knowledge, any site that disturbs more than 5 acres requires that general permit for stormwater discharge during construction activities. This site would meet that requirement. I think we talked about the health department's comments as well, so I think with that, we'd be happy to hear if there's any other questions or comments or concerns from the
One of the
commission.
note on Scott's comments is the bond recommendation of 80,000.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yep.
It's
Do
acceptable.
we have a bond sheet?
Yeah, I provided that, but it was with earlier comments.
Okay. But you're good with the,
We are, yes.
With that, we conclude our presentation. We'll be happy to take any comments that the commission may have or discuss any questions that they may have. And then hopefully we'll be able to close the public hearing.
Ryan, you're good.
I like the idea, I like the plan, I don't think, and it looks like this, kind of like Big Y sign or one of those, it's very similar to some of the other signs we have up and down the street a little further. Yeah, no real questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
No, I think it's a good idea. It looks pretty nice. I live in the area, so I'm good.
Thank you.
Just one quick question, for Will's comment for the reconstructed stone wall. Is it the applicant's intention to go to the straight line, or is it the applicant's still preference to have as it was before?
Happy to do a straight line. We've shown
So
it
what's
on
the-
these plans. We presented a straight line tonight.
Okay.
We don't want, it's not a fight we're willing to hang our hat on.
Okay, so,
Happy to do a straight line wall across the frontage of the property.
that's all.
Here you can see it.
I don't have any questions.
On the front landscape, do you have a front view of it?
Like a rendering?
Yeah.
No, we do not have other than the rendering here, we don't have a front perspective view.
Just a quick question regarding the waivers for the contours on the property line. Is there any concern with soil erosion on the adjacent properties? Is that
No, we
Ground
can,
level?
no, we can, all of the slopes are reasonable slopes that can be constructed and stabilized without any issues to cause erosion or anything like that. We don't expect any issues, and even from a stormwater standpoint, we're improving stormwater operations, so there's no issues on that side either.
That's all.
Okay. My turn. A lot of the questions I had, I interjected as we were going. I had a question on your detail on the boulder walls. Your intent is that these are going to be boulder walls and not concrete block walls?
That's correct. We have a series of different wall types on the property. We
Well,
have,
your your retaining wall detail shows pretty much a rectangular block. So I just want to make sure that this is not going to be a stacked concrete block.
no, we do have some gravity wall blocks, which are concrete blocks in
Right.
certain locations for higher areas. As this site is going to require some pretty substantive site excavations, this is a very rocky area. We expect to encounter a number of boulders, but that boulder retaining wall detail kind of shows minimum dimensions. It does show very rectangular, but the intent is
It's
to,
going to be a boulder wall.
exactly, harvest boulders during excavation and use those for those areas.
I'm just curious, for the gas station, the retail building, the medical building, you have all your leaching fields under the parking lots. And since it is, other than the gas station, it's one lot, there's nowhere else you can put the leaching fields for the restaurant?
You know, one of the, and I think this can best be seen on our utility plan. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges we have here is we have septic systems, but we also have stormwater management that we have to contend with. And the areas that we have, you know, is this, so we've been forced to locate our septic areas, obviously with the appropriate separations from our stormwater basins, our stormwater underground detention systems, and obviously because of the excavation on the property, we're limited in the areas that we can actually put a septic system. We can't locate those anywhere where we're cutting existing grade. So from a soil standpoint, from a septic suitability standpoint, the rear corner of that property, up in this top corner, is the only suitable area to accommodate septic flows for that restaurant building. And the only possible other place where we possibly could put it would be down here, but we need this because it's gravity fed by stormwater.
What
We
about
need to provide attention.
right behind the building?
So right behind the building, as we talked about before from a grading standpoint, this is in a cut condition. So we're lowering the elevation, and this is a small retaining wall, so this is cutting below existing grade that's out there. Also, there used to be a house on the property that was roughly in that location, so that area's been previously disturbed as well.
Just, if I could just, per comments that were just made, I just want to suggest that I add to the contingency items, approval contingent on certification by the geotechnical engineer relative to the stone walls.
Yeah, any of the boulder walls are less than, I think they're less than, typical, a wall greater than 4 feet needs that requirement.
Yeah.
So we have some walls that are less than that wouldn't technically need the,
Everything greater than that?
any walls greater than that would, yes, have to be
Yeah, okay.
designed by an engineer, of course.
All right, so
Yep.
you agree.
I realize your landscaping plan has changed a little bit from what we have here, but why do you have one little spot that says by others?
On our landscape plan?
Yeah, right by the, I think it's right by the site sign. I think that's the sign.
Oh, I think we're calling out seasonal plantings there, which would kind of, which would be kind of be replaced on an annual basis. So that probably isn't appropriate to be on these permitting drawings, frankly. But the intent of it is those are probably going to be redone every year. So
Well,
from
you
an
just
overall,
label them seasonal plantings, I mean, you don't have to take wood.
you're absolutely right.
Well,
We can remove that.
To label the seasonal plant.
Yeah, that's a mistake. We apologize for that.
Okay.
Scribner's error.
I think the comment was already made that pole light P1
It's
is
gone.
no more.
Yep.
Your R2 surface mount light fixture, I think it's under the canopy on the proposed retail building. We had the same detail on another application that you did. This is a surface mount fixture, not a recessed fixture. On sheet 2.71.
Yep, I'm looking at it now. I'm trying to see where those are.
All of your lights, your canopy lights are going to be recessed lights, is that?
Yes.
Is that a true statement?
Yes, that's a
All
true
right,
statement.
so this R2 fixture is out.
Yeah, I think the nomenclature needs to be corrected. It is a recessed light fixture.
Under your lighting notes, note number 3 says that types of lights will be determined by final architectural designs.
That's the one that was supposed to be deleted. That
Yeah,
wasn't deleted.
that's out. That's gone.
this is why we had the comments on the sign. That's the detail we had.
Yes, yep, and we understand that could be perceived as a monument, so we've made those appropriate changes.
Your gas pumps, no video or audio?
No. We provided that detail as well. We provided additional, details in terms of where the safety and ADA signs are by state and federal. We've acknowledged, and we had discussions with staff, this area down here will not get anything. It's going to stay that blank. And we are not expecting or proposing any audio or video.
And your additional buffer landscaping up in the corner with the septic system, since we don't have anything here to review, you're going to agree that that will be based on staff's recommendations or approval?
Well, we're presenting trees and shrubs, which is split between each leaching field.
I didn't see a planting plan.
And then the
I
overall.
didn't see a planting plan that I could look at the legend and see what was being proposed. So
We can provide that specificity if you'd like, or we could also, we're happy to work with staff, but we.
I think that if you provide landscaping to staff's satisfaction and agree to that, we can make that a conditional approval.
That's somewhat of a loaded request.
Yeah, I know it is.
Can I make a suggestion, Chairman? That's, I don't necessarily know, I don't know that's an issue, because then if we have an approval, we have a contingency, if we have an issue, I think we would come back to you with a request of modification. So I think we're okay with that to get us through this process and get us hopefully an approval as a condition of approval. And if there at some point we're at a lock point with staff, we would make a modification to our plan. So thank you.
Okay. Those are all the questions that I had.
I want to ask
Hold on, Leon's got another question.
on the front landscaping, since we can't really, since you don't have a rendering of it. Like, would you be willing to put more shrubs up here?
We have quite a bit of shrubs up there. And it's, let me see if I think this may be something else we can deal with staff. The reason, you can see we have, so what this shows is we, revised the stone wall to be straight across.
Right.
We have shrubs, we have collections of shrubs, we have our sign with shrubs around it, we have shrubs in front here. We do have, I guess, 2 angles with our walls, so it's not completely straight across. We have angles kind of coming into the center. And we tried to make that mirrored on both sides with the collection of shrub plantings and bushes on the Monroe Turnpike side. We tried to mimic that same thing along the eastern side, again, straight line, angles up, and then the walls coming into the site as well with additional plantings along the throat of the driveway, culminated with some shade trees and some additional shrubs at those first islands.
It's pretty significant, and then considering on top of that, you've got the stone wall running the whole length of the frontage. We believe we really, from a perception standpoint, have satisfied your requirements.
Yeah. The landscape plan that you guys have in front of you, the only thing we've done differently is essentially straightened out that wall, shifted it back a little bit to accommodate those plantings. But the rest of those shrubs and species are all still part of what we have on our current depiction.
Okay, so, what's your answer?
We're comfortable with, we think that the plan as submitted more than meets the requirements of your landscaping requirements, and we really would like to implement that. We believe. It's a great balance between a buffer and accent, and we think additional planning would be excessive.
The only difference to the plans that's submitted is essentially straightening out that wall. Same quantity and type of plants and shrubs are still the same.
Okay. Anybody else think of anything else?
Just one last question. What's the proposed color for the metal siding on the retail building? I don't see that in the spec sheet.
Gray. Yes, we're proposing gray.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Mr. Solly, if you're done, let's see if anyone in the audience has any comments or questions. Okay, is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone with any general questions or comments? Mr. Solly?
Chair and members of the commission, just want to thank you for all your input. Your input and the input of staff have helped us create a project that I think we'll be proud of and be a great entryway to the town of Monroe, and respectfully request that this commission close this public hearing and grant this application with the conditions that were proposed tonight. We thank you for your time, patience, and your input.
Thank you. Commissioners, what do you think? Staff, any last comments?
Well, I did have a few comments, but if you're ready to close, that's up to you.
No. Let's hear what your comments are.
Obviously, we're seeing this plan for the first time as you are, and I'm taking a look at the restaurant building. If you could zoom in on the restaurant area.
Sure, actually, you know what, I think I'm remiss, I did forget to talk about one thing there. In shifting the parking, and pulling the dumpster forward, we did shift the loading space to be adjacent to the building here.
Right, so the loading space is shifted up to the front corner of the building, and my understanding is you don't specifically have a tenant, I think you're in talking with someone perhaps, but, I mean, the loading space isn't the most appropriate thing to be up in that corner, and I don't know if you could just flip the loading space and that bump out, which I still don't quite understand unless you have a specific restaurant person, how that bump out works. But the other thing I look more specifically than that is, because you lost the spaces in the back for the shifting of the septic system, got a lot of pavement back there that I'm not sure is necessarily needed. Did you look at having the driveway go down the center and have parking on both sides? So we can eliminate one of those lanes, or one or two of those lanes that you have, and 'cause you got two-way traffic on a very little bit of rear parking. You could probably get rid of a lot of pavement and still achieve the same parking spaces, if not more.
I'm not sure, let me take a look at that real quick.
Even if it was an oversized extra feet in the center lane for a truck or whatever, it still seems you could lose quite a bit of pavement.
No, I think what we do is add parking adjacent to the building.
Well, that's what I'm talking, you
and
put
then
parking
have this
there,
come down,
and a center lane, and then park in the back.
We're happy to, we're talking about a very small area behind the restaurant facility where we don't want to decrease what we're currently showing, but we're happy to work with staff about making some, maybe to evaluate and making some minor tweaks to that overall layout. We can still provide and capture the same amount of landscaping, potentially reduce pavement areas. If that's something that the commission would be comfortable with us working through with staff, I think that's something we're happy to take a look at and try to refine that area.
The other comment is that, again, I don't believe the transformer belongs in the island, and if you do what we just talked about, you might be able to find a place for it and closer to the building.
One of the, I think the loading space we still need up here, it is based on a specific footprint. We do want to provide that there. The transformer location, trying to put it towards the rear of the site is only going to require us a longer easement from Eversource,
No, I
and they may
meant
not allow us to.
Just
do
across
that.
the aisle, or across the aisle, where you have the bump out in the tree.
Could we put this tree over here, and the transformer there?
Well, I'm saying, you could do that and you get again, if you're gonna look at the other thing, your island would get a little bigger too, and go to the rear, so you start opening up more area for that possibility. The other is, with regards to the sign, the reason the big Y sign looks like it does, because it has a considerable variance. Quite a few signs that are of that type in town have variances. And if we went to the code talks about that when you do the pylon signs, you're only supposed to count the last part, unless such sports is definitely designed to be part signs defined herein. Well, you know, they're not, the 2 foot wide isn't the post. That's just fascia on top of a post that's like holding up the sign. And the whole impediment on top with the peak has absolutely nothing to do with supporting the sign. All it does is make it larger and larger and larger. And the whole point of the sign regulation of going to the 40, which we increased to 40 square feet, was to address size and all that. And the commission has worked hard for the last 5 years to go to the monument signs, still having the large size, but trying to gain away from these humongous structures which dot the landscape. And again, the existing ones are based on variances that were historically given to the players. That's all.
I think the sign's compliant, I think it's in keeping with the project, right? I mean, I don't.
That's exactly right. One of the comments that we received was trying to design something that's consistent across all of the buildings. We think this does that architectural feature. Again, it's still, even to the peak of 17 feet, it's within the allowable height for signs. Again, if the commission feels strongly that they believe that those vertical supports aren't simply vertical, horizontal, or diagonal supports which affix the sign to the ground, because of the size of those, the fascia, we're happy to propose something that isn't as aesthetically pleasing, if that's a real sticking point, but we feel this complies with the regulation. And it's a good looking sign.
We will discuss that during our deliberation.
Thank you very much, folks. I assume you're done.
It's up to them. So, anyone else have anything else that popped up in the last 5 minutes?
No.
You still of the opinion that we should close the hearing?
Close.
Close. Hearing's closed.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you. 8:14. All right, next up, site plan review and permit amendment modifications. Item number 7, SDP 2018-02, file number 128574 Monroe Turnpike, Business 1 District, Site Development Plan. This is a item that is reconvened from 8/2/18. Will, do we have new exhibits?
Exhibit 10, Exhibit 11, time extension. Exhibit 12, updated site plan. Exhibit 13, floor plan layout, updated. Exhibit 14, correspondence from law office of Jerry Farrell. Exhibit 15, updated town engineer comments. Exhibit 16, updated planner comments. Exhibit 17, site plan updated by the applicant. Exhibit 18, ART Health Department comments. And Exhibit 19, updated town engineer comments. And Exhibit 20, updated planner comments. That's all.
Okay, for the applicant?
I'm Robert Stewart, 141 East Avenue, New Canaan, Connecticut. I think most of you remember me. I won't go back through the stuff that I said before, hopefully, but I would like to remind you that this is a unique piece of property. It's been retail for 50 years, and originally it was a supermarket. It's probably unusual for you to see someone that owns a piece of property probably paid $500,000 in taxes since I've owned it. But to have somebody come back into your town that ran a successful business and served a lot of the Monroe customers and actually have people that still talk about it. My store, I am an owner of a 111-year-old family grocery store. I started a wine store myself 44 years ago that's been successful. I've been very active in the town, and I think it's important when you consider something that you go by the building, you've seen it, you know what I'm asking. I'm asking for it to be retail, and the only thing that's different is what's sold, but it's still retail, and it has different requirements. It's funny, the last time we were here, we got, I think, a little confused. I mean, and I'm still confused, but it's sort of the chicken and the egg, which comes first? I'm trying to get an application into the Liquor Control Commission, and they have, they want to know, is it zoned for that? And it's B1, and there is other requirement, the 1,500 feet that we exceed, and next to schools, which is no problem. So anyway, that's where we got a little confused. I've been educated by Will, thank you very much, But I also would like to remind you that, or not remind you, tell you, when we had this meeting, I really was a little upset about it, but when I walked out, there was a woman in the audience that lives in Monroe and has been working on the Wolf Park, and she wanted to shake my hand because when she went in 25 years ago, when I had a store here, Wolf Park was putting in, I guess it was jungle gyms and stuff, and she's trying to raise money for it again. So she did a whole bunch of research in the Monroe Courier, and our name, Walter Stewart's, popped up over and over again. And that's what you'd find in New Canaan also. And what I would like to do is remind you that this is an existing piece of property that's been there for 50 years. And I would ask you to grant us a little leeway and potentially waivers if we need it, but we have spent a lot of time with Will, and I think we've done a lot of work and should satisfy everybody here, but there are things that were unknowable. We're not sure we're going to get a liquor license. I don't know what the name of it's going to be. I don't know who's going to run it. So there are areas that are gray now. We did say that we're going to upgrade, which is obvious. I have a lot of pride in what I'm doing. The building has not been occupied for 2 years. You all know what's happening at Amazon. There's absent stores all over the place. I've been trying to be proactive. I'd like to do business again in Monroe. I ask you for a little leeway where it is a unique thing, where possibly you can make a waiver or whatever. I would appreciate it. And so I have hired a really well-regarded landscape architect who's done a tremendous amount of work in New Canaan and around. He's licensed in New York and Connecticut. And he also has given an awful lot of his time to really remarkable things like the Merritt Parkway and the whole bit. He's helped. We've worked with Will, and we hope we can come to tonight something where you can empower the zoning commission, the zoning authority, to approve our application, just saying that it is retail, that it is outside 1,500, and it's legal to sell liquor in Monroe. So with that, I'd like to introduce Keith Simpson.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing me tonight. I am a landscape architect in Connecticut, and I've been registered for 30 or 40 years. I have been asked by the Stewart family to address the site-related issues relating to the property. And I think when they filed the application at the beginning, Will Agresta wrote a memorandum of request for a number of items of additional requirements and specifications he would like to see on the site plan. So that is what I do. So I set about getting the site plan. The first thing that we did not actually have in hand was a completely up-to-date survey, but I think that the survey that we have covers everything that we need. So I think there was a request for a waiver of the actual up-to-date A2 survey requirement. But we could still produce that, but we just don't have it in the process right now. Almost all the surveyors that we know in this part of the state and elsewhere are about 8 to 10 weeks out. So we couldn't produce in this shorter period of time. But if I could, I'd like to work off Mr. Agresta's memorandum as well as the site plans, because he listed a lot of things in the first memorandums, and I went through them one by one and have incorporated as many as I possibly could into the site plan. The last one I received was just today, which I think has 9 remaining items. So if I could bring up the plan here on the computer, then I could show you what the site plan is now.
You have to do the red one. Is it your scan, or is it the scan, the fifth one up?
Schedule.
Is it the schedule alternative parking, or is it the scan 574 site?
Oh, further up.
No, down.
Right there, yeah, 920.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, good, all right, thanks. Let me see if I can bring up the one that's colored, because it's a little clearer, I think. Okay, good. Thank you for your patience. This is the property. You know, Monroe Turnpike is down at the bottom of the screen. Right now, there are some parallel parking spaces which are actually on the state property, and we were asked to address that, and we have. So all of the land which is south of the the property line adjacent to the highway is now to be a lawn landscaped area. So just to briefly, the size of the property overall is 1.5 acres roughly, 1.48 acres. The zoning, as was mentioned, is B1. The building was built back in 1965. And we do have more parking spaces than is required for the zone and for the size of the building. We need 50 and we have 61, including 3 which are handicapped. We have made some changes to the entrance area there. At the moment, there's 2 really very wide ingress and egress onto the property on either side of the building. And we've narrowed those entrances down so that they still function as in and out for both locations, but we're proposing to put concrete curbs in there and to landscape that that area, basically. We definitely would like to continue to have some parking spaces in front of the building, as is shown there, diagonal spaces, for several reasons, really. One, of course, they are there now and have been there for many years, and so we do feel they're grandfathered. But also, from a practical retail matter, having certain number of spaces clearly visible in front of the building is felt to be a very strong draw for a retail space. And it's our anticipation that those spaces will be the most heavily used because they'll be the most visible and the most quickly accessible. And so rather than have those lost, and there was a question from Mr. Agresta as to whether or not we really felt we needed those, we really do definitely want to hold on to those spaces. They are so proximate to the front door. But also we feel from a safety standpoint that anybody who comes off the highway and draws into those parking spaces, when they're leaving, they will be able to just back up quite safely and then head out through the other exit from which they came in. And they won't be blocking the entrance into the whole parking area. And so we feel that's a valuable safety component to it, whereas if we had only 90-degree parking coming in straight off the highway, once again, we expect that the spaces closest to the front door of the building will be those which would be used the most frequently. And to get out of those spaces, people would be backing into the entrance route into the main parking of the property. So we think those spaces are particularly valuable, and we think they're valuable functionally, and they're likely to prevent backing up onto the main highway itself, which could happen if we didn't have them. The handicap spaces are right there next to the building as required. I'll get to Mr. Agresta's memorandum in a minute. And we've been I think I may have been working off some ADA requirement sizes, and he's got some other standards, but I'm ready to accommodate whatever the standards are that you all feel that you would like to have. So we do have adequate parking. The drainage on the property is such that it all pitches away from the building. It's not quite flat, but it's almost flat. It pitches about 2 feet from the building out to the outer edges. There are no storm drains. It's an entirely sheet flow. But with the introduction of some planting islands, which are shown there with trees and so on, we're actually reducing the amount of impervious surface on the entire property by about 6%. I know you look for a standard of 4, I think, but I think we're able to achieve 6. At the back of the building, we would have the area for a dumpster enclosed. I've provided details as to how that might look and function. We have loading areas at the back of the building also. And then with regard to signage, I think along the lines of what Mr. Stewart was just saying, as we don't actually know yet who the tenant might be, what the name of it might be, and so on, we'd rather have that issue deferred until such time as we know who the tenant's going to be, and then we can come in with a design for the signage at that time. So overall, the real objective, of course, is for us to get this property up and running, looking good, well used, and a successful retail operation. So if I could just go to Mr. Agresta's most recent memorandum, and I'm pleased to see that a lot of the items which I had received to address before and have tried to address, he has noted by eliminating those. So I think we are really down to about 9 items, I think. One relates to the painting of the building, and I think Mr. Stewart is committed to painting it and improving it, and I do have a note on the drawing which says that we would paint it in a beige or light color to get it spruced up, but we don't have any other plans for any changes to the building architecturally at this time. I think, once again, it would depend upon some tenant interest. So that is his first item, which is number 3B, and he was talking about upgrading in appearance and so on. We don't have elevations per se of the building, but we're not planning on changing it, so it's really the way it looks at the moment. A second item is that I did have on the left-hand side of the building, as you're looking at it now, 4 parallel parking spaces down that side, because there actually sort of is room for them. But I understand that when there's more than a certain number of parking spaces on a property at all, so we could just simply eliminate those spaces. We'll still have an adequate surplus of parking on the property, so we're quite prepared to eliminate those spaces. Similarly, with his mention of the handicap spaces, which are close to the front door, it's really a matter of the slightly different dimensioning of the width of the space itself and the width of the striped area adjacent to them. But we're quite prepared to accommodate the widths which he's requesting there, and we can just make that adjustment, I think, quite quickly to the drawings. I do have near the entrance to the building in the bottom right-hand corner, I'm showing an island there, a planted island, so that it'll add some landscape interest to the front of the building. Mr. Agresta asked if that could be slightly larger, and I certainly am happy to look at that and see in which direction we can make it slightly larger, as long as we can get pedestrians in and out safely, including handicap and so on. I'm sure we can make that refinement.
Would you consider, you have a cross-hatched area
Yes, indeed.
adjacent to that island? Instead of the crosshatch, could you just enlarge the island?
Yeah, the island is sort of within that crosshatch area.
Yes, but coming towards the bottom of the sheet.
Right.
Follow that crosshatch line and make that your new curb line. Leave an opening still to get access, great access to your front door, but just
Right.
slightly enlarge that island to make it that crosshatched area also.
Okay, yeah, I'll be glad to tune that out for you. On the, he mentioned in item 5C, the basis by which plants are specified, and I'm quite happy to switch the classification of the trees from caliper to DBH, which is diameter at rest height, and I know I can make that conversion and include that on the plans. There is a tree in the very bottom right-hand corner, which is in the state's right-of-way, and I sort of first noticed that and felt that it really did impede some of the visibility of property from the highway when you're coming up the turnpike. And so I thought maybe it would be a good idea if we asked to take that out. It's on the state property. It doesn't have to come out, but I just thought that it might improve our visibility somewhat. We might be able to achieve that just by pruning some of the lower branches off it and not actually taking down the tree itself. But I think Mr. Gresta felt that it wasn't really necessary to do it at all. And so we don't have to do it, but it was just an idea that we had. So if he doesn't want it to be taken out, we can be okay with that. In number accessory components 6B, I did show on the details some screen fencing around the dumpster. I mentioned that it would have wood, but there was a note on the drawing which I had put on earlier which said that it could be either that or possibly chain link with slats and so on, which I guess is something that you don't want to see. So if you don't want to see that kind of fencing around the dumpster at the back of the building, then we won't do that, and I'll just take that reference off to an alternate plan and say that we'll do it in wood only. The signage, I think I just talked about, but certainly when the time comes and we've got a tenant and we've got the lettering and the wording and the coloring and everything and the size, we'd like to come back and have you approve a sign with its location and size and everything in conformance with the regulations. And then lastly, we did show on the plans that we wanted to change the outdoor lighting that we have to dark sky lighting fixtures. But beyond that, we really don't particularly feel the need to do a lot of additional lighting on the property at all. We feel it really functions as a security lighting at the moment. But we're happy to provide that detail for the plans and so on. So all of those things, I think, are the issues which Mr. Grester has done, and I very, very much appreciate that he gave us his comments in a timely way, because then we were able to get onto them and try to answer them. And so rather than receiving them tonight, I would like to thank him and just say that we appreciate that they came through in a way where we were able to try to address them. But I feel that they're all within range for us, and so I hope that you may take it in the understanding that we can submit that plan. If you made any of these a condition, it would be quite acceptable to us, and we'd wait for Mr. Gresta to be able to sign off on the site plan. So if there's any questions, I'm glad here, and I'm very glad to answer them, sir.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, I would leave that tree, the one up front on the state. I don't think that needs to be touched. The back of the lot is still connecting to the building next to it, or the property next to it?
Yes, it is. There's a route through there. It's probably about 25 feet wide.
And you haven't considered closing that off, or you just want to keep?
I don't think so. There's no particularly, I haven't heard any discussion really as to whether that,
That was actually, the zoning commission requested that. So I've given the joining Steve's permission to use that.
Gotcha.
That is something we seek all the time, to get people off the main road so they can go between properties.
Gotcha. All right. And then, no way you take down the sign that's already there? If you're gonna come up with a new one? It's kind of like a
I don't know.
tall sign.
Well, we're gonna keep that's grandfathered, I hope.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm getting rid of the goodwill sign. But-
Yeah, I would say that.
So, I think it's going, honestly, I mean, I want you guys to work with me a little, because, it's a little gray area in the way, but I think I want to put a nice awning on the whole thing and have a nice sign on it,
But it's still gonna be up, it's gonna be that
I would come
high.
back to the commission at that point and, show you guys what it is, but basically, I can say that it's not gonna be any bigger than what we have. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
I have no questions.
Okay, John?
No, no questions.
No question. No, I think he answered.
No, I'm good. The only question or comment I had was about that front planter by the door, and you've
right.
already spoken about that. You've addressed all of town planner's concerns. Scott,
I submitted comments.
I have them in my hand. I'm asking you if you want to just run through them quickly.
Yeah, I'm assuming you got them?
I did, yes, indeed, I did receive your comments, sir.
So I tried to list a number of items, and I recognize that, given the nature of the proposal, it might not need to address all the items, but I kind of listed so you would know what some of the deficiencies are. Main item was trying to meet the MS4 standards for the reduction in pavement or impervious area, and they've done that. They've put in the green areas, so that was accomplished, so, but I wanted to point that out. But there still is recommendation that there still is quite a number of painted islands that could also make that even better. There could be even further reduction in impervious area for what that's worth.
But they've met the requirement.
They met well, it's not a specific requirement, it's a guideline that we work toward.
Have they met the guideline?
They've met the guideline for this property. The guideline for the town is to achieve a percentage, and we can use over, if a
Have they
site
met the
has more than they
guidelines for
need.
this property?
Yeah, for this property, yes. But again, it's cumulative for us meeting our quota.
I understand.
All right, so under to the additional landscape, we just asking about the directional traffic signage. Typically, there's something to mark the entrance exit so that people know that it's, what's coming up. I was more concerned about that when I thought that this was going to be a one-way traffic pattern. But anyway, that was an item that was flagged. Roadway lane striping was requested only so that I could evaluate the turning radius. They provided a template for the turning radius, but the driveway at the entrance over here, the radius needs to be enlarged here so that an SU-30 can get in without encroachment into the opposing lane. Doesn't look like much of a widening, but a better radius there will prevent that encroachment.
Okay.
And I know I just had a meeting with DOT, and they'll be looking for that. So better to address it now. Stormwater quality and quantity. The quantities addressed by the reduction in the impervious area. But there is, just so the commission knows, there is ponding back here. This area floods and has evidence of standing water after rain events. More an inconvenience for them. In a way, it provides somewhat detention. But at some point down the road, you want to consider detention for the property. Sidewalks along the property frontage, that's just typical requirement or consideration for all these commercial developments along the corridor. So just kind of put that on there for your information. The relocated dumpster, this dumpster area, typically you don't just stick a dumpster out in the middle of the pavement. You know, I was suggesting that it have some raised island around it. The evaluation of the handicap parking, I'm kind of working blind here because they did not provide any grading information. And typically what happens is when you propose islands like this one and these, you can't evaluate what's happening without grading, because sometimes you put the islands in, you end up with ponding because that's where the water goes. So I was unable to take a look at that.
It's a very, very shallow grade. It's virtually flat, It's just enough pitch to drain.
I hear that all the time, it's virtually flat. That's much worse. When a site is very flat, that's when we have problems with
Not for
ponding.
meeting ADA requirements.
What's that?
Not for meeting ADA.
Not from meeting ADA, but typically a flat, very flat property is a problem because you get ponding.
Well,
especially
I
when-
mean, I'm looking at it as a professional as well, and in terms of grade for handicap, because I do that a lot, and I think it has enough positive pitch. There's about 2 feet from there to the edge of the property line, so I think it has sufficient positive pitch to not pond.
Yeah, again, I don't have that, you know, typically that's confirmed on paper, so the A2 survey isn't a concern because it's existing and they're really not changing much, so the fact that they're not providing a current A2, I don't have an issue with, but again, it's hard to provide you with the information I need to provide without the grading. Again, I'm in agreement with Will that this parking in the front may be a marketing consideration, but it's not technically, it's not a good scenario. Very, very tight, and you don't need it. I mean, it could be redesigned here, have just as many parking spaces, just as close to the building, have more green area, less impervious area, and much, much safer. I don't agree with the philosophy that you can come in and it's safer. A diagonal parking is a problem, and I don't recommend it. But on the other hand, it's compliant. I'm not saying that it's not. We talked about the grading, we talked about T2s, the survey. Sightline, and notice that they're taking this tree down because the sightline, it's questionable whether that is needed or not. I have no idea because they didn't provide the sightline information that's needed to confirm. I mean, having said that, these driveways have been here for many years, and so it's not like we could move the driveways or anything, but the only thing I was looking for was typically you would show the available sightline, so we'd be able to see if there was any tree trimming or tree removal or other obstruction removal needed. I don't think that's going to be a big item.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned in the presentation how extraordinarily good the sight lines are in both directions from both of the entrances and exits. I mean, they are
Yeah, I mean, that's the sense I have too.
hundreds of feet, not, there's no immediate curves very close by.
Yeah, I think what was throwing me off was the note about the trees.
Yeah.
And then sedimentation, erosion control, which would be minimal, but that should be on the drawing, and we have certain requirements in our permitting that we require that they be on people's plans, so that's why that's on here. Details of the concrete curbing, They got concrete curbing, but it should have more depth below grade, very minor item. The directional signs, if they were being provided, need something. And I never got a bond estimate form. It's such a small development that I just went ahead and did the bond estimate myself. I came up with a recommendation for $3,000. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Any other information that you would like to present at this time?
And I think I've covered everything that I can think of, unless Mr. Stewart has something that I have missed.
No, I just appreciate your time. I'd like to do business in Monroe. I'd like to help the town. I think it'd be a win-win.
Well, we just
If you don't need any more information, we can close it for now and get back to it. at
get back to the deliberation. So everyone's good? We'll close it?
Close it.
The only thing, I would hope that you would be able to empower the zoning administrator to sign, that's what, to sign the application.
Yeah, that's what, if I could address that, because what we did last time, and the chairman wanted to have a town attorney, and I talked to Attorney Marino, and we sent him an opinion letter from a former chairman of the Liquor Control Commission. I'm not sure you all got that, but that gentleman is also just a specialist in liquor law, and I'm sure you got an opportunity to look at it. But in essence, it's a separate task. Mr. Simpson and my twin brother, they're appreciating and working on the site plan, but this really is a different thing. It's just.
Well, we did address this at our last meeting. For us to grant you what you're requesting, we have to grant you a site plan approval. And we needed this information in order to determine whether or not we can
I
allow
needed to have
the
that clear.
CEO to sign that
We will
document.
not have authorization for the zoning and enforcement officer to sign that application until the site plan is approved.
Until we have a site plan approved,
Right.
that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, next up, deliberations and determinations. Item number 8, time extensions. 8, SDP 2017-03, file number 123, 233, 235 Monroe Turnpike, request for a 240-day extension.
Ask the applicant to come. I don't know if he's here.
Is someone for 233, 235 Monroe Turnpike in the audience?
The reason I asked is because he's asking for such an extensive request for extension. The normal time frame, which he was given originally, was 180 days, and then he was granted another extension thereafter. And 240 is more than both the original and the extension previously given. So I asked him to come to present to give you some reasons why it's taking and why he needs 240 days. He was reminded, and he was also given the agenda again today. Why he's not here, I don't know.
This is the property that's adjacent to Monroe L.
Close by to Monroe, the two houses turning into commercial business offices, which is presently being rented as residential property at the moment.
Well, I suggest that give the applicant the benefit of the doubt. Let's grant him a 60-day extension and give him an opportunity to come and talk to us about what his intentions are and what his problems are.
Can you provide a letter or anything?
Well, yes, he has a letter saying that he respectfully requests an extension of 240 days to satisfy the conditions of approval. That's it. Before we go any further, who are we seating tonight?
We just need one, right?
Yes.
Jonathan is next in line.
And Jonathan, you're seated. That would be my recommendation. It's open for discussion amongst the,
60 days is appropriate.
okay, we have a motion.
I'd like a motion to approve STC 2017-03, file 123, for 233, 235 Monroe Turnpike, for the 40-day extension.
60.
I'm sorry, 60-day extension.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No.
Call the roll.
Formicella, yes.
Mayini, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Next up, we have SDP 2017-06, file number 126, 814 Main Street. Request 90-day extension to file final site plans and extension to January 18th, 2019 to complete site improvements to maintain the conditional zoning certificate of compliance.
As he notes in his letter, he's been working with the DOT. In fact, we had a field meeting with DOT yesterday.
Yes.
Yesterday. They're looking for him to build a slightly larger driveway than what was approved. And we kind of were working that out and going through what DOT really needs and wants. And now he has to draw that up and have us look at it and have DOT look at it. But he's been diligently working with DOT and trying to accommodate whatever it is they've been asking him.
Is this the law firm?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the attorney that's moving into that
Yeah, next to
little house across from Drive to
Yeah, yeah.
Rain.
Mhm.
All right, so we have a request for a 90-day extension.
And it's also for the extension of to complete everything for the conditions.
Right, we had given him until, what, June, July? I forget.
I forget too. but it was
We
a
had
while
given
ago.
him a deadline to complete his site work, but obviously if the state hasn't finalized what they were gonna require, he can't finish. So 90-day extension and an extension to January 18, 2019 to complete his site work. Motion?
Make a motion to approve SDP 2017-06, file number 126, for 814 Main Street, for the 90-day extension.
And the other extension as well.
And the extension to January 18th.
The extension, oh, I'm sorry, January 18th, 2019.
Second.
Motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No, sir.
Call the roll.
Formicella, yes.
Mayini, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Okay, next up, item number 9, bond releases or reductions. 05-1, file 1216C, 1312 Monroe Turnpike, Bird's Eye Estates subdivision, request for bond reduction. We have a letter from the manager of the company doing the subdivision, requesting a 50% reduction in their performance bond. We have a report from the town engineer detailing with the work that has been completed. Per our regulations, we require complete sub-base and base course installation and surface course application prior to the release of the bond. But Scott, I'll let you voice your recommendation.
Yeah, I'm going ahead and recommending the reduction of the bond without the final courses, 2 top courses of pavement. And personally, I always try to discourage developers from putting the final course of paving on a subdivision road when there still are a number of lots that haven't been built on yet. And the reason for that is so that we get a better end product. If they were to put the final course on now, then they're running their trucks up and down, you're getting dings and dirt and other issues with the pavement. So I think it's better to give them back 50%, let them have that money back so they could continue on with the work that they need to do, Certainly, enough of the work is done. There are a few other items, there's certainly punch list items. There are a few other things in the right-of-way which still have to be finished, but again, it's 50%, so I feel that it's adequate to cover, what we have left is adequate to cover what needs to be done.
So that was my question. With this being a performance bond, if for some reason the developer defaults, is there enough bond money to finish paving the road?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve bond release 05-1, file 1216C for 1312 Monroe Turnpike, Birdside Estates subdivision, for the request for a 50% bond reduction.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No, sir.
Call the roll.
Formicella, yes.
Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Okay. Next up, item number 10, meeting minutes. Some of these we tabled at our last meeting. So let's see. All right, so for August 2nd, Porter, Ambrosi, Kelly. We won't seat any additional people. We'll go with 5 seated for that.
August 16th, have all of you.
August 16th, we're good.
Same thing with
And
September.
last week, we're good. Okay. All right, first up, August 2nd. Motion?
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 2nd, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion, any comments, any corrections?
No.
All right. Call the roll.
Formicella, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Mayne abstain.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, I'm sorry, Lisa abstained.
Well, you made the motion.
What's that?
You made the motion.
Oh, should we redo it?
I thought we were all.
You weren't here. My error. Commissioner Lisi was not present that night.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve meeting minutes dated August 2nd, 2018.
Second.
Thank you. We have a approval, we have a second. Call the roll.
Formicella, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Mayne abstain.
Porter, yes.
Lisa abstained.
Okay. Now, moving on to August 16th. Motion?
All 5 of you, all 5 of you.
that one, I only have this.
Oh, they're from the last meeting. Yeah, you were
I'll
here.
make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 16th, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, sir.
Call the roll.
Formicella, yes. Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
September 6th. Everybody was here.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 6th, 2018.
Second.
Discussion? Comments?
No, sir.
Nothing?
No, sir.
Call the roll.
Formicella, yes. Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Okay. Huh? All right. 5-minute recess, 9:01. Okay, it is 9:07 PM. We are back in session. Next up, item number 11, pending application deliberations determinations. First, we have RAA 2017-11, file number 994, Planning and Zoning Administration Land Use Text Amendments. Okay, we should all have draft approval. This was a commission text amendment to consolidate, reconcile, and update permitted land uses into a single schedule, consolidate and reconcile off-street parking standards into a single schedule, update off-street parking standards with current and reduced parking ratio standards, and expand, reconcile, and provide increased clarity to definitions of permitted land use terms. This has been discussed repeatedly at numerous subcommittee and commission meetings, and it was discussed at our last commission meeting, and Will was instructed to write this
We
draft.
didn't actually have deliberations, did we? Oh, we did, right.
Yes.
Sorry, never mind.
Yeah, we had
Never
deliberations.
mind.
So, you have a draft approval in front of you. I'd like to start with a motion.
Make a motion to approve text amendment RAA 2017-11, file number 994E.
Okay, before anything, Will, since Michael is not here, we're gonna put Jonathan on.
Well, if we did deliberations, we started with Michael, so he would be
All
absent.
right, so,
So
Jonathan
Jonathan
will
would
just-
not be for this one.
okay. All right, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Call the roll, starting with Bruno.
Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisi, yes.
Okay, thank you. Next up, items for deliberation. SCP 2018-07, file 1602A, 485 Pepper Street, Industrial District 1. Okay, if you all remember, we closed this hearing at our last meeting. This is for the manufacturing facility of 485 Pepper Street. So, comments, let's start. Jonathan, you're seated for this.
I didn't have any comments. I would just want to gauge the commission's interest. Were there going to be a restriction in hours of operation for this project because they were going to process material?
Well, did we have any discussion about that during deliberation or during the public hearing? Did they indicate what their hours would be?
I think they generally indicated it was just normal business hours. I mean, it wasn't hard and fast in any, specific thing on the plan or anything.
Okay.
I can check what they were saying.
They never presented to the commission that they were going to be a 24-hour
No, they didn't.
facility or anything like that.
No, so I think we could safely say it's gonna be like a 7 to 7 operation.
And then they were going to place truck signs to indicate going to Main Street by taking a left on Pepper Street.
Right, no right turns, no right turns out of the property for trucks.
Yeah.
Since they're gonna put a sign at the exit.
That's all I have.
Bruno?
I'm all set.
There were no special comments or considerations that you had concerning this project?
No, sir.
Leon?
I think that would just state that the machinery that's just used for the operation of this facility, not to have any other
the applicant did indicate during the public hearing that they would only be storing material here that was, or equipment here that was used for their operation on site. So that's part of the, one of the conditions.
Right, and they had concerns about the noise. We just kind of study.
Yeah, we can. We can require that we get a baseline noise evaluation, sound evaluation, pre-construction, and we can get periodic monitoring during their operation to monitor the sound levels. They've indicated that their building is going to have sound attenuation built into it, and they're putting up the sound barrier walls around the perimeter around that building, so we can request that we get a third-party analysis to ensure that the measures they've taken are adequate.
Okay, that's all I have.
I'm good at
There were a couple of considerations, Will, that the applicant agreed to that I think should be noted. You know, they are enclosing the storage facilities completely, as they indicated. The siding on the storage facilities will match the siding on their manufacturing facility. I think we should note that the doors of the storage facilities should normally remain closed unless they're stockpiling material or loading out from the bins. They should normally be closed. They indicated that they will provide a Elgin-type sweeper on the site. Their maintenance program should include at least daily, if not more, periodic sweeping of the lot to maintain the cleanliness, make sure we have no dust problems. Do you have any other notes there, Will?
Well, I have a lot of will do's next to my comments, so I'll incorporate those things. You took the panels, the building instead of steel instead of aluminum, is that something you remember?
Well, they called out aluminum, but if they want to use, you know, a coated steel panel instead of aluminum, that would be fine.
Okay.
That was for the roof, right? No, that was for the other building. That was a different application.
They listed the equipment which we can put on the approval. And so then the other questions are, you guys okay with their analysis of outdoor storage? Whereby they use all the buildings as opposed to just a manufacturing building. And I know, Scott, if you had anything.
Well, just my comments under administrative number 2, technical 1, 4, 6, 2, and 6, traffic, they addressed drainage 2 and 1. You already added the sweeping and the dust mitigation, and also catchment at catch basins to collect sediment in the form of more of a permanent silt sack type arrangement. Item H, number 1, pre-permitted permits, and I had recommended a $20,000 bond. And the last thing is that the Inland Wetlands Commission had a recommendation for the containment walls along the piles that were immediate directly adjacent to the building, the piles that were the end product, and you guys had talked about that. I think you were leaning toward not having them.
Well, you know, they indicated that it would be a hindrance to their operation because they have to get behind the building with
Yeah,
their equipment. So we kind of agreed with their point that it would block that access.
okay. I just felt I needed to put that into the record because they did send it to you.
We discussed the panels, we discussed the noise.
Well, it's already in the record, it's an exhibit.
Their pile, their source pile in the yard, should we limit the height on that? They're bringing the material in, they're dumping it into a big pile in the yard, and then they're gonna load it into the facility to process it.
Right. Didn't the applicant provide information
Yeah,
about how high that pile can be?
There's a limited footprint for it, right?
Well, there's a limited footprint.
They can only go so high, right?
Unless the footprint expands.
Well,
But I thought they had proposed enclosing the surge pile against the fence.
Well, they did add, I don't know, some concrete barriers around around three sides of it
Right.
to limit it. Well, they do have on the plan surge pile, maximum height 15 to 20 feet. So what height is the commission comfortable with?
we have to give a specific number?
We should.
max.
We should. Maximum height.
What was the height of the fence that they provided in front of the surge pile?
In front of that
Right,
pile, the
facing
fence
the
is gonna
road.
be 6 feet high.
15.
So that land sits higher than the road you start with.
Yep.
So if you have a 20-foot pile, it's gonna look like a,
Yeah, I think 20 feet is too high.
15.
Well, I'm looking for input.
Going toward 15.
15.
Yeah.
I'm still
Most.
thinking about it. I mean, for that, I don't see a big deal with 20, but it seems like everybody else wants 15.
All right, maximum height of their surge pile is 15 feet. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, Scott and Will have their, comments that will be included in anything that's put together. What's the direction you think we should go in with this?
I think we'll draft an approval with the conditions that we set.
With what?
The conditions that we spoke about, the sound attenuation study, the doors to be remain closed, of the storage containers, sweeping daily, the surge pile being 15 feet.
And staff and their comments.
And
And
then
their
the
staff
administrative
comments.
comments.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Yes.
All right, so Will, Commissioner would like you to draft an approval on that, that we'll review at our next meeting. Next up, item SEP 2018-04, file 1599A, 10 Victoria Drive, Industrial District 3. All right. This is the proposed manufacturing, compounding, assembly, and treatment of articles made principally from previously prepared materials. So this is the recycled glass being ground up to be used as an admixture for concrete. So, comments?
I think the landscaping they provided is adequate. I think one of the main issue is going to be any potential limitation on the hours of operation. The applicant made it clear that they need trucks to transport the product in the evening and into the early morning, and was unwilling to not transport that product at those times because of efficiency reasons. Though I think a consideration should be that they said that they would not process the material in the evening, and that it would only be the trucks at that time. That was my understanding of that.
No, I believe what they said is they would not receive material.
Receiving, but they would
at
process
night,
it
but
in
they
the
would,
evenings.
they would be processing 24 hours a day, but that's all within the enclosed facility.
Okay.
So you're not getting trucks there to drop stuff off, they're working on, they're not getting trucks there to drop off material, they're just getting whatever they have from X time, they're gonna work on throughout the night.
Right.
And then they're just gonna, and most of those trucks are gonna be full, right? So it's not like the silos will be running to fill these trucks.
They said that they would be filling the trucks during the day and parking them.
So basically, the
The
tractor
trailer.
trailer is just backing up, hooking up to the
And then the
container.
And that's
No,
what
no,
they're-
it's full already.
Hmm?
Those are full already.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So the trailer's not hooking up and then coming around and filling and then
Right.
going. It's full, and the trailer's just backing up, hooking up to it, and go.
Okay.
So what are we recommending? What are we requiring?
I don't think there should be any outdoor activity after a certain time. My opinion. What time that is, I don't know if it's midnight or 11. If they want to continue up doing operations within the building, that's one thing.
What do you mean activity outside though?
Trucks moving in and out.
I don't agree with that.
The big noise factor is, with the trucks, is the braking coming down the hill and the backup alarms. And if we made it a requirement that they had to use, they could not use audible alarms, they had to use strobe alarms on their tractors, that would eliminate that noise issue.
Get rid of the backup alarm.
Right.
Then we should, we can put signs up for the jake breaks.
I've seen those on other roadways in noise-sensitive areas. You know, no compression release braking, or no jake brakes. So when the trucks come down the hill, they have to come down just using their manual brakes rather than engine braking. But those are some conditions that would address some of the concerns about noise, but, you know, we have the ultimate decision as to whether or not nighttime operations are allowed. The operations within the building, I'm not as concerned about because of the construction of the building. We currently, I think, have on file some baseline noise information, Will, from when Walmart was being proposed. I know studies were done. If we don't have it, I know we can get
I know
the
there
base-
was a whole study plan, I forget exactly whether, I think they did perhaps the baseline numbers, obviously, they couldn't do anything after.
Right.
But I know they had at least a plan, if not that plan plus the baseline.
So we have baseline noise readings that were done previously, or we can require them to be redone if that information is not available. But like we talked about with the other operation on Pepper Street, I think that no matter what, we require the applicant operator to provide independent third-party noise monitoring at different times of the day. So we get an idea of what they're actually doing there.
I think that'd be appropriate, but would that only be for the processing, so what's happening inside the building?
It would be
or would
for-
it-
it would be for their operation.
And so if they're allowed to move the material in the evening hours, that testing would also be done at those times as well.
Quite frankly, when they're moving the material during the day, they still have to comply with our noise
Right.
ordinances. You know, we have stricter requirements after, I think, 7 PM, but there are still daytime requirements also that they have to meet, and they have to prove that they're meeting.
They have to prove that they're meeting the nighttime requirements as well, correct?
Correct. Well,
So I don't know, if they're meeting our requirements at night and approving it, then I don't understand what the holdup is.
well, we can't get those readings until they're actually in operation.
I know, but if they don't follow the requirements, there's penalties to that, correct?
Well, we could make it a condition that if they don't meet the requirements of the sound ordinance, that they will no longer be allowed to operate during those hours.
Correct.
So we'll do that. Then, I know that a bunch of people are concerned about the dust. I think they handled most of the dust, but do they have a sweeper or anything on the premises just in case there is some dust? Not really.
I don't think that did they have any type of outdoor sweeping in their
No,
program?
I mean, they don't anticipate anything to be lost, because one, that's a loss of revenue, of course, and
Only if there were failure in the system would the product be exposed.
Right, because all the dumping's happening inside.
I'm saying that if there's anything that lands on the ground, they're gonna clean it up.
well, yeah, I mean, they have to go through, I'm sure through their permitting with DEEP, they're going to have all that kind of stuff, but I mean, it's not like you'd have a sweeper on site for a potential
No, I'm
single
just-
event, so.
Well, that's
All
different
I'm
than the
concerned
other.
about if it's just laying around, I just don't want it laying around, the DEP's gonna take care of it.
Well, their permitting requires it requires DEP to come in and obviously monitor their
Inspection.
permits, but, I mean, we can require what you're saying, but that's not a big deal. I mean,
What about during construction? The dust and the noise?
Well,
What
they said during
control with that?
construction that most of the blasting had been done
Yeah, they're not anticipating any blast.
because of the
That's what
Walmart,
they-
so
that's
most of
what
that's been done. They did say that they were gonna have the water fans on the machines for that, I mean, I don't know.
Probably have more dust in the truck parking lot than sand from the road.
Right, you're probably gonna get more dust coming in with the tractor trailers and dump trucks for moving or dumping, whatever they're.
So DEP, they inspect this site regularly?
Well,
Is that what you're
no,
saying?
I'm not saying that. They have permit requirements for DEP, which, with regards to the material handling and the, you know, in addition to OSHA type requirements, you know, those things are pretty strict. How often the state's gonna come here, I'm not gonna begin to tell you, so I have no idea. But if you're worried about a spill and having some containment plan, I mean, they're gonna have to do something like that for their permitting. So obviously, if, you know, we should, one of the requirements obviously is they get those permits, but, you know, we should also get copies of those, you know, cleanup and containment type plans that they have to do. So that we're, you know, the fire marshal should be aware of all those things as well. I mean, it's,
So we can make that as a condition that we get those copies, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What other landscaping buffers. There were some comments about maybe augmenting the landscape with coniferous evergreen trees in place of some of the deciduous trees to provide a year-round buffer.
So let's do that.
I don't have an issue with that. That's fine.
That's fine, let's do that.
I don't think they had any issues with that. Right?
No.
It's a good recommendation. So do that.
Can I try
That's
to-
actually a great idea.
You got the note about the no compression release braking signs?
The only problem with that is the place that you would put them is not on their property.
You're right. I'm gonna put them on Victoria Drive, it's a private road.
It just is not there.
Yeah, but you could post them, they could be posted on site. The truck drivers are gonna be regular, they're gonna be coming back and.
Well, they could do one on
Once
their
they
site.
leave, they're gonna.
Well, they can work that out with the owner of the private road.
Okay.
Meet that condition.
And if they have a problem with that, they can report back. I'm just going through, to see what, some of the environmental concerns, as we said, the DEP will be permitting and monitoring what goes on with their physical operation. Their parking, I think they overparked, or did they ask for a 15%?
Well, we were gonna work with them to, that's one of the will do's here, for the deferral. They can defer more than they were asking. They were only asking for 5, they can go up to 15%, which is, I think, more than, maybe double that.
Yeah.
And, another week, they could ask for even twice that.
Let's try to reduce that impervious surface as much as we can. We had commented, and they agreed that the roof will not be galvanized or a bare galvanized. It'll be some kind of a painted finish. The area that is outside their limit of disturbance, where they're proposing to grade and seed, is that part of this application? Is
Well,
that
we
being handled
talked,
separately?
yeah, we talked about that they would, that's sort of like remediation work from past ill. So I think what was discussed at the hearing was that the CO would be conditional on that work being taken care of.
Okay.
So if they need to get any kind of approval relative to that, that's part of taking care of the remediation. But they have to accomplish that and finish by the time they get a CO.
I remembered that there was I thought they said that they wanted to, that they would get an approval from inland wetlands,
That's what they said.
but not necessarily have the work done.
No, they have to have the work done in order to satisfy the plan.
And I don't think we need to note it specifically, but the improvements on the road crossing for the trail is part of this application. And they do have it on their drawings.
On my memo of September 5th, I have majority, again, labeled as will do, so those will be incorporated in draft.
That's shown on the site plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just saw that, I thought that was
Anything else in your notes, Will or Scott?
Yeah, I got a bunch of things. My comment about the benchmark would stay in. I believe they agreed to line stripe the cul-de-sac within the property would stay in. That they agreed to extend the island in connection to the paved area via ramp off the northwest corner of the shop warehouse office area. That would stay in as a condition. There was some drainage issues relative to time of concentration tables and drainage comments number 2, 3, 4, and 6, and 7, and also the additional hydrodynamic separator that they agreed to provide. Those would all stay in. Those are technical on the hydrology report. Details that the geogrid would be put under the stabilization material under the grass access pathway to the detention basin, F3. G2 and 3, that they need to procure a floodplain permit and that they need to provide verification that they don't need a permit from the water storage tank. You already talked about the visual backing alarms in lieu of the audible. Painted line striping to function as, we already talked about the cul-de-sac. And that you get a copy of the administrative decision from OSTA that there's no need for change to the previously issued certificate. I had an item here about the additional street light at the north side of Victoria Drive intersection. They have one on the south side. Verification of adequate turning radii for the trucks. I believe they agreed to include the widening in the radius at their entrance to Victoria Drive, so that will be on there just as a reminder and for the record. Will talked about prior to the CO providing that they do the corrective and restoration work on the disturbed area that they're not going to be building within. And I had a bond recommendation for $80,000.
Okay. Anybody else have any issues?
No, sir.
Can we inquire to make sure that those
It's pretty much all covered by the DEP.
So, I'm just gonna, that's the only thing. The neighbors about that, I think that we addressed all that, we put all that.
Yeah.
And I agree. Industrial site, everything else.
Paul, any other notes? No?
No, sir.
Where are we going?
Apple Drive to approval with those requirements and conditions.
Yes.
You agree? I agree. All right, well, the general consensus is that draft a approval letter with that list of conditions. Okey-doke. And we will review that at our next meeting. Yeah, next up, we have SDP 2018-02, which is 574 Monroe Turnpike, site development plan that we reviewed earlier this evening. get my right pile of papers here. All right. Where do we want to start?
I think they agreed to
Okay.
most of the stuff, right? Will's comments.
This was a retail use going to a new retail use, which under normal circumstances would require nothing from this commission. But since they are going to be requesting a liquor permit, they need to get a site plan approval. So, we have a site plan that we've reviewed. They're asking for a waiver on the A2 survey.
And I don't have a problem with
No issue.
that. I have no issue
So
with that.
that's no problem. Just going by Will's sheet, the applicant has pretty much agreed to any of the outstanding items that Will mentioned. I'll just run through them quick. They're eliminating the parallel parking spaces on the north side of the building. The spacing for the handicap is incorrect, and they will adjust that to comply with the correct dimensions. The island by the front door is going to be enlarged. It will encompass a good portion of the proposed island. The plant sizes will be made compliant with our regulations. We're going to leave the tree in the right-of-way to the south of the property.
They're repaving the parking lot, I'm assuming, or?
They're patching the parking lot where it's required. It says that there's no pavement will be repaired where necessary and resealed. Existing elevations and drainage patterns of existing pavement to remain unchanged. Install new striping and other pavement markings as shown. So they're gonna dress up the lot.
Okay.
Patch it as needed, seal it, paint it. On the dumpster enclosure, they're going for wood.
You gotta have it maybe
What's that?
they want to be more toward the back of the building.
Yeah.
There needs to be a curb around that, too.
It needs to be, the dumpster needs to be on a concrete pad.
There is a concrete pad
It is a
there.
there's one there?
There's one there.
All right, well, I'm not
There's
gonna,
no curb,
I don't think we
right?
need to
Leave
make
it
a
then.
move.
No, we'll leave it.
No, there's it's an elevated pad,
Oh, that's all it is?
yeah. They're gonna fence around it.
Okay.
I don't have an issue with
If
that.
it's
No, I
good,
don't
yeah.
either. There's already pads already there. Leave it.
The exterior signage, they are asking to defer that until they get a tenant. They'll just have to come back for a sign permit
That's fine.
in the future. Any existing Goodwill signs must be removed. The sign can stay, the wording should be removed. The exterior lighting, it's all wall packs. They will be made dark sky compliant. They've already reduced their impervious more than required, so I think that they're good.
I'm sorry, John's talking to me about a tree. What'd you say?
Shame on you, John.
Tree's staying, right?
The tree is staying.
I just said that.
The tree is staying unless Scott determines that it impedes the sight line, in which case
Okay.
it would have to be removed, but I don't believe that's going to be the case. There was a question or an issue with the parking spaces, the diagonal spaces in front of the building.
They've been there forever.
Those exist,
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah, I think that we just leave that.
They're not doing the parallel lines on the side.
No, that's going away.
So you're gonna keep the diagonal in front.
We're gonna keep the diagonal in the front. We just, the applicant has to confirm that the 88 spaces, not only the dimensioning, but the grade is compliant with federal regulations. The, we're not gonna shift the driveways, but Scott, if you think that that radius needs to be adjusted,
They're redoing the driveway apron anyway, so I don't think it's a big deal for them to
Okay.
do that, so.
that's gonna fall under the state anyway.
Right, they're gonna ask for that.
Excuse me. Hello? I'm sorry. The existing lot is, as it's been for 50 years or more, so I don't think we're going to do anything with that. Sediment and erosion control. Scott, what are you proposing?
That's a very minor item. It would just be a few notes.
Not much disturbance.
I mean, there's really not much. They're adding a couple islands.
Yeah, I mean, all it would be is a couple notes on their second sheet and for contingency for any problems they have.
Okay. And the bond, Scott was recommending 3,000 for the bond?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Any other,
The other consensus matter I need from you, so I can draft this up, would be, obviously, we have information in the record that they are more than 1,500 feet from another package store. The other consideration that you have to do for the alcohol service or sale is affirm on the, which we'll put in the draft approval, that as far as the location is appropriate, and you've given consideration to nearby schools, churches, and other places that minors might frequent, and that you don't find a
Okay.
problem with this location.
This, for as long back as I can remember prior to it being Goodwill, was a grocery store that sold beer. So there have been alcohol sales, not liquor, hard liquor, but there have been beer sales out of this facility going back 50, 60 years at least. I don't think anything has much changed in the general area surrounding this. They're far away from St. Jude's. I don't think there's any reason why any detrimental effect would be had by them selling liquor from this location. That's my opinion.
I feel the same way. St. Jude's is quite far away.
Yeah, it shows Monroe out, that's pretty far away too.
Is that sufficient?
It's like 10 miles.
It's the next closest school.
And I know we're over 1,500 feet from the next closest
Liquor store.
liquor store. Well, I know that you'd like to have your approvals written and reviewed before we vote on them, but I think that this is pretty much clear cut, and I'd like to ask the commission what their opinion is on proceeding to a vote on this evening. So that would be you guys.
Yeah, no issue.
Will, any real strong objections?
I just think that's the bad form, because it's better that you have it all in writing before you just actually take the vote, so I haven't misinterpreted or put something in into the document that then for some reason gets appealed and somehow affects the approval.
So we just approve it next meeting then.
Okay. All right, then we'll go by your recommendation. We'd ask you to prepare a draft approval that we will review and vote on at our next meeting.
Nice.
Any other, any other issues for us to deliberate on tonight?
205. Are we going to deliberate on 205? Monroe Turnpike?
205,
Tell them right, Bob.
we can start. We close the hearing, we might as well start. And it's not even 10 o'clock yet, so I don't have to ask anybody's permission.
Not yet.
You don't have to go to the bathroom, people will do that.
Listen,
Let's just talk about it real quick.
yeah, no, we're going to. Let me just get my stuff.
You guys want to go home to your families or something?
I don't know about you, but.
You already had your bathroom break, your fresh air break. You're good.
SEP 2018-03, file number 1598A, 205 Monroe Turnpike.
Nothing more
Okay, let's talk about one of the big issues right up front. And that is the letter dated August 12th from Solely Engineering requesting waivers of 6.4.C, 6.4.D, and 6.4.E. No change in contour made within 25 feet of the property line, no artificial slope greater than 14 degrees, which is 4 horizontal to 1 vertical, within 50 feet of any property line, and no artificial slope greater than 14 degrees within 50 feet of any street line. So as was illustrated by the applicant, they have slopes on the north, south, and east side of the site that, number one, fall within 50 feet of the property line, and number two, exceed the 4-on-1 slope that we require in our regulations. So, I'm calling it the north, to the right side of the plan, where it's abutting another LOR zone. To the left of the property is that landscape material yard. And to the upper left of the plan, I'm not sure exactly what that property is, but it is an LOR zoned piece of property. We have slopes that range from, I think, 3-to-1 to 2-to-1, depending on the area. Yeah. Actually, the very back corner is an I-2 property that it abuts before it goes to the RF1s on Spring Hill Road. So where they have the steeper slopes, it is other LOR or I-2 properties. They are compliant along the property lines with the residential zones.
So what sort of negative impact do those create?
Steep slope.
Yeah.
not extremely high. I mean, this one I think is
This one's
15
high.
feet.
One's high,
This is 15 feet.
Yeah,
one's
Yeah.
15 feet.
but that's sort of, it's really hidden, I'd say.
Yeah, and this is,
That's the highest one.
this is an I-2 property
Yeah.
here.
But these are not very high at all, I think.
Well, this one comes 464. So this at this point right here to the parking lot is about 10 feet. But we have a wall here that is 5.5 feet high. So from the top of the
Plus the
wall
10.
to the property
So it's
line, we
50.
got about 5 feet.
So in total, it's 15. Is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying it's about 10 feet total
Oh, 10 feet.
from property
Yeah.
line to the parking lot,
Right,
but there's a
yeah.
5-foot wall here.
Yeah, but that's not,
So it's about
just a 5 foot high
5 feet
slope.
over, I think this is a
Yeah.
40 scale, 5 feet over 18 feet maybe?
Yeah, I don't see an issue with that.
No, the largest one on the,
Other one.
is it south side?
This one?
The left
Left,
side,
yeah.
the back left,
Yeah, that abuts the
Industrial.
industrial.
I-2.
Okay. I don't, that one would be the biggest issue, but I don't see that being an issue in this case.
And that, the toe of that slope, I mean, it's maybe 10 feet at the closest point, but it does, as you go back, the distance from the property line does increase to maybe 30 feet. So that one's not right on the property line. The ones right on the property line are the ones up front, but they're not as high, not as much of a grade differential as the back one.
Because this one's going down.
This is
towards
going
the
down.
development. So they're not looking up.
No,
The neighbor's not looking
the
up at a
neighbor's, the
slope.
neighbor is up gradient here,
Right.
down gradient here,
Right, but this is the
the landscape. area.
landscape, yeah. So the residential.
Resident,
that's-
well, this is LOR,
Yeah.
but this is all residential and they're all
Yeah.
higher.
So I don't see an issue with that.
I don't see an issue either.
Yeah.
All right, so the waivers are granted.
Again, they'll be part of the approval draft.
Yes.
You have the other waiver to deal with too. Landscape buffer
Oh, the one in the back.
with the septic.
Where they're proposing to put the leaching fields in the landscape buffer. This I was a little bit more concerned about originally because, you know, this is the residential property behind the LOR zone. But with it being tiered the way that they're proposing on the plan that we don't have, and the tiered landscaping
There's
that.
two rows of landscape.
There's 2 rows of landscaping that Will is going to be able to take a pretty hard look at, and if he doesn't like it, and the applicant doesn't like what Will's proposing, they'll have to come back to us to take a look at it. So I'm a little more comfortable that this area will be properly screened, and there'll be a decent buffer here for this property looking this way.
Yeah, plus the building is substantially far away from the property in that location.
Yeah, this is pretty, well, this one isn't though.
No, but that's not what the issue is.
Well,
The issue begins here, right? With
the whole issue is that this is a buffer from all of these properties from looking.
Right, but isn't is the waiver for the entire length here? Or is it just?
No, this is where they want to put the septic in the landscape setback. This is what the waiver's for.
Right.
Putting
So,
the septic here.
Yeah, so I'm saying in this case, that's where the building is furthest away anyway.
Yeah.
And again, there's 2 rows of landscape.
Yeah, but could be 2 rows of ornamental grass.
Well, no, I don't, I mean,
Well, I don't-
does it,
I didn't see what, I saw
Oh.
circles on a landscape plan.
Oh, we don't have
I don't know
that.
what they
Okay.
were.
Alright,
We
so that
don't
needs to
have-
be verified.
But
yeah.
they're willing to take. they're
They,
willing to
sure,
work.
yeah. I think that they'll be reasonable. What they originally proposed for that area was, I think, a bunch of blue spruce. Colorado blue spruce, 10 to 12 feet high. That's what was originally proposed for this landscape buffer. So I
You
think
can
it's,
still use those, right, just in 2 rows, couldn't you?
no, they could.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the buffer,
It's good.
planting, putting a septic in the landscape buffer?
I have no issue. The applicant also indicated with Will's note about mowing practices. Would that be in the plan as, the approval as well?
Right.
Yeah.
To not mow that area?
Yeah, it's not gonna be a maintained area.
But they said they'd mow it twice a year. Right, well,
Do we want it mowed at all?
Well, it's good to, they're gonna have to maintain it to some degree, because we can't let the herbaceous, the woody herbaceous species come up.
Yeah.
If you leave it alone, eventually they would. They gotta keep they gotta keep that out, and the best we do is mow it once or twice a year.
Okay. Okay, so that's the, that takes care of the waivers. What, the changes to the stone walls, gonna be straight in the front now? Everybody's good with that?
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Okay. Will or Scott, I don't know who does the calculations, but if you want to just double check on the internal landscaping compliance. The applicant stated that all of the paved areas are included in the calculation. You're going to work with them potentially to reconfigure the layout behind the restaurant, potentially move the transformer.
Are you all okay with that loading space up front?
Pardon me?
Are you okay with the loading space up front?
Well, if we,
I think it should be on the other side of that bump out. What is that bump out, actually?
It's sort of like an outdoor area. It's just a screened wall that they're gonna hide stuff outside. It's gonna be outside, it's uncovered.
It's a wall.
It's a wall.
was there a door on the back of the building?
There's a door into that area.
No, not that area. From what I've seen, or what I see on the drawing, what I'm assuming indicates door location, the black triangle, it does not appear that there's a door on the back side of that building. So putting a loading space back there, when there's no door,
The elevation has front of it. This is just a screen wall, that's all it is, and I don't.
No,
I
this
think-
is the front.
That's the front. And I think there may be a door there too. If you look at the floor plan, maybe it tells.
So that's what they're loading through that opening?
No,
That's
this,
that.
I don't know if that
This,
is.
this is the back of the building. Here's the door.
That's the way back.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I didn't see any indication on the site plan.
And the other thing too is they don't have a tenant. So this building you're not working
Well,
with
that's
a tenant.
true.
I mean, restaurants aren't, you know, just fit them into space if you're building brand new.
I think it should go on the other side.
Yeah, you should get the loading. If you're able to reconfigure, get the transformer off the back right corner of the building, and get the loading zone back there, I think that would improve things tremendously. The landscaping, in general, other than the back corner with the buffer by the septic system, what's the general feeling about the landscaping?
I thought it was adequate as presented. Adequate as presented.
I have no readings with that.
I thought it was good. I'm happy with it. The site lighting is good. There was a note about a couple of the fixtures that might need to be tweaked. All canopy lights will be recessed, fully recessed. That's pretty much all the notes that I have.
This has architectural review board approval, I assume, or recommendation.
Recommendation. Did it go to ARB?
I believe so, earlier renditions.
I was just taking a closer look at the elevation. So, vertical metal siding there. It's a flat wall, right? Looks pretty industrial.
It's got cultured stone around it. It's a little more contemporary than industrial.
Yeah.
What's the thought process behind moving the transformer and the loading dock?
Get it out of the parking lot.
But the transformer is not, like, it's in the island.
That is correct.
So it's,
It would be, in my opinion, it would be better to have that closer to the building with some low landscaping around it to shield it, rather than out in the middle of the parking lot where it's, I'd rather see a tree there to shade some of the paved surfaces, cut down on heat signature from the site, and get that closer to the building where we wouldn't put a tree anyway.
and then the loading is because there's no door back there?
Well, there is a door back here.
Well, just to get it away from the
But the
the street side.
generator, it's a transformer.
It's gonna be right when you drive by. The
It's,
loading will be
they're
right.
proposing a loading right at the front of the building.
Right.
Where would it go? Would it go towards where the retail is, that side?
Around the back side of the building,
Okay.
yeah.
And what would they just Do they have parking on that side? I don't think so.
There's park, well,
So they would just
again,
move
this,
that to the
this,
back?
this site plan is not, their what they showed us tonight, there were some tweaks to it, saying that they might be able to reduce some of the impervious area by reconfiguring it and getting the loading behind the building. Because when deliveries are made, more than likely, they're gonna go in the back door of the building, not the front door,
And there's a door where,
right here.
so the, it does kind of make.
Again, they don't have a specific tenant, and I guarantee you, whoever they get a
It'll
tenant
change,
is gonna
yeah.
wanna change this building no matter what.
Yeah.
But they're not gonna want the loading in the front either.
But just keep, just keeping the loading area away from the street side, I guess.
Right.
That's the goal.
Yeah, like Will said, if Arby's or Chick-fil-A or somebody comes in, that they're gonna have a floor plan that's their corporate standard that they're going to want to use in this location, so
gonna change,
this is
yeah.
all subject to change.
The ARB had 3 recommendations. Their recommendations were the gas pump, and this was Exhibit 16. The gas pump area columns color, they recommended be changed from green to white, yellow, or beige. The proposal is this outrageous green color. The restaurant roof color be changed to charcoal to match the gas station convenience store roof. And that consideration to change the retail building awning color to navy or neutral. I don't know what color it was.
The awnings are proposed as being a dark blue.
Well, that would be pretty much navy, wouldn't it? So those were their 3 recommendations to you.
I think that there was commentary about the column colors being an industry trademark kind of issue, and I don't think that they were,
Well, according to what they said, they have all their other locations, so it's their brand.
yeah.
So why would we
Well-
make them change the brand?
But there's so much other branding.
Yeah, but if they have it at every single one, all of a sudden you're gonna come to Monroe and be like, no, you can't have green, you gotta go to,
Well,
Brown.
Didn't they also remove other signage and instead would like this instead?
I don't think that's a deal breaker.
I know, but if that's their colors, that's their colors.
I'm fine with the green.
If that's what color they are, I don't have an issue with that. I mean, it's a gas station.
Exactly.
What was ARB's recommendation on the canopy roofing?
Was it the canopy? They said change it wasn't the canopy. It was
Columns.
the color on the canopy had to do with the columns. The other 2 comments were the restaurant roof color. Changed to charcoal to match the gas station convenience roof. So the 2 buildings that you see in front would have the same roof.
Yeah, because the canopy has the timberline charcoal shingles on it.
I think it was over.
It's a good shingle.
It's here, right?
It's a good shingle.
Well, didn't we discuss that already? The applicant?
I use it every day.
The point is, do you want the restaurant and the gas station, which are the 2 forward buildings, to have the same roof shape?
So it won't stand out, right?
Not necessarily.
Let me see what the.
If the materials of the buildings are different.
This plan calls for timberline charcoal.
Yeah, they may have done it already. I don't
They
think.
changed it, so.
This is back in, I don't know, a while ago.
Well, no, that's the gas station. The gas station matches the canopy. I don't think that the restaurant necessarily has to match the gas station. Two
No, if the
completely
materials are
separate.
different on the building itself, you know, the walls and why shouldn't the roof be different?
We'll make them red. We'll make them red. The restaurant building is gonna have sunrise cedar. But it's gonna also have a beige hardy plank. And a brown, you know, that color stone.
Yeah, should be sharp.
So I think that I think it's appropriate. I don't think that we should make them change it. Come on, people, what other issues do we have to review?
Oh, the sign.
Oh my God, Jesus.
I don't have an issue
What's
with
the
the
matter
sign.
with you?
Nothing wrong with the sign, but we have to address the sign.
Well, again, it's intent versus interpretation. And when the sign regulations were revised a few years ago, you know, a pedestal sign was a sign on top of a pedestal. This is more of an elaborate design, which now has two pedestals that could be construed to extend all the way up to the top with just the sign in the middle. So it may not be what we intended a pedestal sign to be, but I think in interpreting the regulations, it falls within a reasonable interpretation of what our regulations require. That's my opinion.
I agree. I agree.
I'm fine with the sign, yeah.
Okay. Sign's good. I want it to be in the approval that there's no audio or visual at the gas pumps.
You mean on the screen?
Yeah, I don't want it playing
No, I get you.
commercial, TV or
I get you.
music or anything.
I get it.
Close enough to a residential zone that it will be quite annoying, I believe. All the things about, you know, DOT approvals, health department approvals, all part of, you know, conditions of approval. Well, what else you have on your list?
I don't have anything else.
Nothing? Scott?
That the survey should be certified, that I was just providing a comment for you on the truck 30, the larger trucks are gonna encroach. Yeah, I tend to agree that on these sites that the larger trucks will encroach into the opposing lane within the site. If you're okay with that, then that won't be a comment. Grading that the ramps throughout the site, they agreed to do that, we'll keep that on there if you agree. The traffic and safety, I don't have a major issue with the circulation around the restaurant. It'll be more their inconvenience if the queuing blocks their lane there. So that's no big deal. The greenbelt dimension they agreed to provide along the sidewalk, the detail of the improvement and the improvement plan within Monroe Turnpike. I think it was just, I didn't get the plan that they had provided with some of the sets, that should stay in and that should be part of the set, and I'll review that and work with them on that. It's mostly DOT though that's looking for stuff on that. And the drainage comments, again, detailed comments about inverts and technical items under E1A would stay in, and contingency for dealing with groundwater in the ENS plan would stay in. Details for the hydrodynamic separator, I would say stay in, and then the approval contingent on, I think you said, the DOT OSTA permit, verification of the, that does not need to change, the verification of the deep general stormwater permit, and contingent on certification from a geotechnical engineer that the boulder walls are acceptable, the boulder walls greater than, any boulder walls greater than 4 feet in height, and the recommendation of $80,000 for the bond.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
That's it. Anything else?
No, sir.
Yeah?
I'm good.
All right. So which direction are we going?
Draft approval.
All right, Will, if you could please prepare a draft approval, we'll review at our next meeting.
I'll do my best to get all 4 of these done. I think I can do that, but don't kill me if I don't.
We would never kill you. Never.
Mr. Foley wouldn't mind if he had to wait 2 more weeks. Regulation Review Amendment Work Session. We have been working on a draft subdivision text amendment for section 111-303, open space. It was in the packet from last month's meeting, or last 2 weeks ago's meeting. John has it, I have it.
I'm sure I have it somewhere.
No way for that. Do you have it on,
No, I don't.
well, we're gonna review it.
I don't know if it's on here.
Go start going over it.
It's probably not on here.
I don't need to be here for that.
No, this is the other one.
You have yours?
I don't have it on here. though.
Good.
Good job, John.
Copious.
Are we connected to the internet? I mean, our net? Okay, John.
Yeah, I believe this is.
I mean, I don't have
So
to
you
do
gotta,
it.
to get into the K drive, you can get the internet, but to get into the K drive, you have to be able to.
I can't do that. Can't do that.
I do, I pretend I'm
Do you want me to summarize it?
I do pretend to be a roofer every day. I have a couple of questions.
What?
Yes, please.
All right.
What?
Does anyone at least have one to share if they didn't have it? I can give you. No, I can't. You have one?
I'm sharing with John.
All right, it's not really that complicated.
Oh, we already know.
So, what the draft amendment would do is, we already have a section in the subdivision regulations for open space. So we're updating that to more current relative standards. It talks about open space, the purposes of open space, for natural habitat preservation, it's for wildlife habitat, scenic vistas, ridgeline hilltop protections, things like that, as well as for parks and active recreation, as the case may be, from location to location. That all subdivisions will reserve a portion of their property as open space in perpetuity. It'll be conveyed to and accepted by the town or by some other approved conservation nonprofit organization. And the other nonprofit would be something that you as a commission would deem appropriate, if not be the town. The land would be protected, and it shall abut. It doesn't have to have direct access to a public street unless it has to have direct access to a public street, except for in the instance where it might be abutting an existing open space parcel where it can be merged with another piece that has the access. So that's sort of the updating on the definition of open space and the purpose and what you're looking for. So in the condition of the open space lands, that isn't really being changed in the amendment. The area of open space is being proposed that there would be an area equal to or greater than 15% of the total combined acreage of the subdivision property, and then at least 50% of that would be usable open space, in other words, not containing wetlands or excessive slopes greater than 20%. And so it's not just, land that the developer just can't see any use for. The open space would have some value, and obviously some uplands make sense to protecting if there's wetland resources or water resources. So it's kind of looking for those things. And then if they give more than the minimum requirement, then, and there's 25% of those areas that I was just saying, you can up that, but it has to be equal to what you're giving. The method of protection, the applicant submits the necessary draft map and legal instrument, because obviously this is conveyance to somebody, whether it be the town or the nonprofit or conservation organization, and that's something that you would approve. And that could be, the map could be the subdivision map itself, it could be a separate map. Obviously, there'd be a deed that goes with that. And that's something they'd have to provide and make sure that it does the things that the regulations requires. Exclusions. This is under state statutes. It's a kind of strange statute, but anything in a subdivision that's less than 5 lots and is being given to, that relates to a parent, a child, a brother, a sister, grandparent, grandchild, aunt, uncle, or first cousin, for no consideration, meaning they're not buying it. We cannot require the open space for whatever reason, or affordable housing, same thing. Those are state statutes. We don't have a choice about those things. Okay, then there's a new section about the alternatives to open space reservation on site. And what this is written in a way that if the commission first has to evaluate the land and evaluate the value of the land for open space preservation and what might be around it, what it might connect to, and what resources on the property worthy of protection under open space. And if you find that it really doesn't have any of those things, then you can look to an alternative. But if it has those things, it's a reservation. So in the odd case that it doesn't have those things and you determine that you're going to look at an alternative, the different types of alternatives would be an off-site reservation in lieu. So in other words, they can reserve some other land they might own somewhere else instead of on-site. And it would have to have similar conditions and type of land and size. And another option would be a payment in lieu of, and that is set by statute, and we'll talk about that lower, that market value plays into that, and that's set by state statutes, how much the town can collect as a fee. That goes into a specific fund that already exists in the town, it's established by ordinance, and the money can only be used at the moment that ordinance only allows it to be used to, I believe, buy additional open space. So it doesn't go into the general fund and then it gets to do other things. It has to still relate to open space. And the value is set by market value equal to 10% of the fair market. This is all state statute. The appraisal, that's how you figure out that value. The payment, if there is the alternative chosen for in lieu of payment, there would be an option to the applicant to how he would pay that. He could pay it all up front, lump sum, when he files the map, or he could do it in equal fractional payments based on as he sells off the lots. He would sell a certain amount. If he goes that option, a lien would be placed on each of the lots, and the liens would come off as he makes the payments. And that's what item B was. And then in the end, he has to have them all paid before any of the bonds would be released for the subdivision.
I think an important portion of this is that the fact that if a subdivision has suitable property as part of the subdivision that we can take as open space, there's no other option. We take the land. So these other alternatives are only if there's no land as part of the subdivision. It's not like the person doing the subdivision can say, you know what, I don't want to give up 2 acres of land from the subdivision, I'm going to pay you instead. They do not have that option. The town takes the land as open space. The only time that these alternatives come into play is if there's no suitable land as part of that subdivision that we can take as open space. So it puts it kind of takes that flexibility from the subdivider away, and gives the town the open space that we want. Because payment in lieu of is a loser. If somebody builds 2 more houses and they pay us, let's say, $60,000 in lieu of those 2 building lots, well, if those 2 houses get occupied by 2 families that each have 3 kids, and it costs us, $15,000 a year to educate a kid, there's $90,000 in education expenses on those 2 houses for 1 year, and we've gotten $60,000 in lieu of.
That's
So,
not what open space is about.
Yes, it is. Open space is based on generation of population. So when you generate more population, it increases your demand on all your services, parks, recreation, open space, police, fire, which all cost money.
I thought it was more, having more natural.
it is. My point is,
Not to overbuild, basically.
right, taking payment in lieu of is a loser.
Yeah, financially, yeah.
And we don't get the benefit of open space. So,
I just had a couple comments.
that's why we're discussing it.
So for the sections that are requirements by Connecticut general statutes, I was just gauging if there's any interest in putting a citation in that statute so that someone reviewing this section could go to that section and review those requirements. Also for subsection E, for the exclusions, I know that this Will said that the statute identifies those type of people, but the commission has the ability to enlarge that group of people, not, meaning we can't take out aunt and uncle, but we can add other things, and what the commission's leaning towards adding other individuals, given that there are now non-traditional families with non-traditional titles, as well as living situations, and transfers of those people to another people, or to just stick to.
Will, is the state statute pretty clear on that?
Yeah, that's verbatim, and the statute is already referenced in the very first sentence of this of the ordinance.
Right. Which one? Oh, for the open space one?
Yeah,
I meant for the subsections.
yeah, all those things are in that section, 825.
Okay. Well, just wondering if there's any appetite for adding those to the specific sections.
And the exclusion one has that same, has the section where those come from,
It has,
when the affordable housing definition.
well, it has for the affordable housing.
I don't think you should riddle your code with the state statute section, especially since if they go and change the numbering and things like that.
As far as, you know, this section E, I wouldn't change it from what the state statute requires. That's my opinion.
Oh.
And again, we're discussing this because we as a commission are proposing a text amendment. So you guys are in on this too.
Are we allowed to talk again?
You know, we're not deliberating, we're discussing.
It will. That land between my house, the backyard, and Spadaccino's, is that open space, considered open space?
I don't know that one.
You know where Spadaccino's funeral parlor is, right?
On 111.
On 111. All that vacant land behind there, were those two houses that you guys were postponed about, the attorney's house and then that dump next door. All that land behind there's nothing there.
I don't know, I'd have to look on the map. It's possible that it's either open space or it's.
Wetlands.
Well, it could just be wetland, that doesn't mean it's open space.
Okay.
Could just be undeveloped land that somebody owns.
And if it's wetlands, it may be, no one's doing anything with it because there's not much you can do with it, probably.
I wouldn't buy anything that was put
Yeah.
there, so.
I mean, I'd have to look at this specifically in the GIS, and I could tell you specifically once I look at it.
All right.
I just don't know it familiar.
Was there originally a requirement for when subdivisions come in to have open space, and we're just expanding that, or
Yeah.
putting this in all, what was the original? Because you said it's 15%?
The original standards were, in my consideration, were pretty lame. It just basically said the commission can require open space.
Okay, so we're bumping it up, that's what I wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
well, if
It's
you
gonna
look,
be more.
I don't know if you
I
have
don't
your
have mine
copy.
now.
All the blue is new text.
Gotcha.
So we're really expanding the,
And when the committee was doing this, part of we had input out, this sort of came as a suggestion from the Conservation Commission with recommendation to do this. So they gave us some draft codes from other towns, and during the process with the committee, I did do a research of, I don't know, 30-odd towns, and it ranged from 15 to 20% taking open space, and the committee went to the 15%.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic idea. I just wanted to make sure we were upping our threshold for, doing that.
John, you said you had a couple comments?
Oh, no, those were the two.
That's it?
The E and the stuff. Then for E, then, lot is defined by the general statute.
Excuse me?
So for exclusions E, in a subdivision of less than 5 lots, so that would be then defined by.
A lot's defined by the subdivision in the zoning code as well as state statute.
Okay.
But a lot is a lot in fee simple.
So I just want to make sure then that is coming from the state statute then.
5 lot number is coming from that,
Okay,
if that what you meant.
that's it.
You've already provided input. You. Yeah. All right, well, so this is the proposal that the subcommittee has put forward. Do you guys feel you need some more time to review this, look at it, consider it, investigate it, or are you satisfied with what we've just reviewed as being relatively complete and what we want to portray as our regulation?
Next step would be a public hearing, right?
That is correct.
I'd say move forward with that.
Yes, sir.
John?
All right, well, then we'll move forward with this.
I think Leon's done.
Correspondence, other received. Anybody have any correspondence?
I think we have, so. No, sir.
Commission reports. I have nothing to report. Any commissioners have anything to report?
No, sir.
Staff have anything to report? Nope. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Third.
10:44.